Hola, bienvenidos. Welcome to our 9th annual Hispanic and Latino Studies Virtual Summer Institute. I am Connor Dolan, a 5th grade student from Discovery Key Elementary School. At this time, our second grade friend, Catalina Rodriguez, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance in English, followed by our 5th grade friend, Alina Rodriguez, who will recite the pledge in Spanish.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yo promoto lealtad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos.
Thank you, Katarina and Alina. And now, please help me welcome our Administrative Program Planner for Hispanic and Latino Studies, Ms. Patricia Trejo.
Hola, bienvenidos. Gracias, Connor. You did such a great job. What a wonderful opening. And gracias, Alina and Catarina. Very well done. So bienvenidos. We are delighted that you could join us from all over this great nation. Today, we'll be hearing from several different iconic Hispanic Latinos that have made significant contributions to the United States, specifically our educational system, by helping to develop equitable practices, policies, and/or mandates. The purpose of today's collaboration is to help increase the cultural competence among our school district personnel, so that they can help our students to enhance their level of understanding and ability to interact with different people from different cultures, with different traditions and different customs. Please help me welcome Secretary Julian Castro. He served as the United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under the President Obama's 2014-2017 term. Before that, he was mayor of his native San Antonio, Texas, the youngest mayor of a top 50 American city at the time. After his historic campaign for president in 2020, Secretary Castro launched People First Future and Our America with Julian Castro, which is a podcast with Limonada Media that puts on a spotlight on vulnerable communities and takes a humanizing and hopeful look at how drastically the American experience shifts from one person to the next. Please help me welcome Secretary Castro.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be with you. Thank you so much, Ms. Trejo, for the invitation to be here. Thank you to everybody who has helped put together this 9th annual Hispanic Latino Virtual Summer Institute. I also want to say thank you to Connor and to Alina and Catarina for helping us out today. And also to Dolores Huerta. It's great to be her warm-up act today. I know y'all are going to hear from her, and she's been such a tremendous leader for many, many years. And those of us who have come after her owe her a big debt of gratitude for how trailblazing she has been and continues to be. And it's great to be part of the same program with her. I'm Julian Castro. I feel like I always have to say that because I actually have a twin brother, Joaquin. Joaquin represents the 20th Congressional District of Texas. He's a congressman. And Joaquin and I, we grew up in San Antonio, Texas, on the west side in a neighborhood that basically is about 80 or 90% Mexican American. And so we grew up in one of the barrios of San Antonio with my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother, whose name was Victoria, had come over to San Antonio from Mexico when she was just 7 years old because her parents had passed away and her nearest relatives brought her to San Antonio. She never finished elementary school, and so she worked her entire career as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter. She raised my mom as a single parent and worked hard so that my mom could go further than she did. My mom was able to graduate from high school and then go on to college. And actually go on eventually and to get a master's degree. My mother raised my brother and me as a single parent. And Joaquin and I grew up on the west side in the public schools of San Antonio. And I want to say a huge thank you to all the educators on this Zoom for the spectacular work that you do day in and day out to make sure that every student out there has a shot at success. I know that throughout my educational journey that there were many teachers without whom I know that I wouldn't be where I am today. I can think of different moments and different classes and different academic years that made a huge difference to my success. And behind all of those were dedicated, professional, compassionate, hardworking teachers. I also know that because today I'm married to an educator. My wife, Erica, has been an educator now for 17 years. She spent the first 8 or 9 years as an elementary math teacher, and today she's a curriculum specialist in one of the local public school districts. Ultimately, I feel like because of the education that I got, I was able to reach my dreams. My brother Joaquin and I ended up graduating from our public school here in San Antonio, and then had the opportunity to go off to Stanford and then go to law school at Harvard. Both of us became lawyers, the first in our family to become professionals, and both of us went into public service. Joaquin as a state representative and then congressman, and I served as mayor of San Antonio and then served President Obama as housing secretary. So I feel like I was able to reach my American dream. And I know that for each and every one of us, that's what we want for the students who are watching today and the students that you see in your classrooms every single day of the academic year. So as we go forward as a nation, it makes sense not only to continue to uplift Florida's educators and our nation's educators, and to continue to invest robustly in the education process. It also makes sense to do what y'all are doing today, which is to make sure that the students that are sitting in those classrooms see themselves reflected among the teachers and the school staff, and also in the curriculum that they learn from. I know for me, when I thought about what I wanted to do in the future, it made a difference whether I could see people that looked like me, that came from the same place that I did, that had already done that. We used to have a mayor in San Antonio, Henry Cisneros, who served in the 1980s and had become the first Hispanic mayor of a major American city in 1981. And at that time, when I was a kid, in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, and so forth, I didn't know that I would go on and run for mayor one day. But I did see Henry, and I thought, wow, if he can do that, that means somebody like me can do that. And we need to make sure that no matter whether somebody wants to go into public service, or if they want to be an engineer, or they want to be an artist, or a doctor, or whatever it is, that they can see others who have achieved that, and to read their stories and understand the history of success in their own communities. That's more important than ever, not only because I'm sure that just like America's classrooms, Palm Beach's classrooms are more diverse than they ever have been. It's also important because the destiny of our country is intertwined with the destiny of the Hispanic community like never before. Today, a quarter of our young people, a quarter of folks under the age of 18 are Hispanic, Latino. That means that in the years to come, in order for our nation to do well, the Hispanic community has to do well, and vice versa. And so all of us have an interest in making sure that our young people are able to see themselves in the lessons they learn, in the people that they study, and of course, that they have all of you as great educators helping to shepherd them to make sure they're able to do well and have a better shot at reaching their dreams. So I believe that every single day you have a moment where you can impact the lives of these young people positively. And I'll just conclude my remarks before questions by telling you about the most meaningful moment in my life, which came when I was in the second grade. I had a teacher who one day after class pulled me aside as all of us were leaving, the students were leaving the classroom. And she said, you know, I noticed that you've been doing well in class, and I want you to go home and to do up to page 57 in your workbook. And I don't remember what page we were supposed to, everybody else was supposed to go up to, but it wasn't all the way up to page 57. That was giving me extra work. But she saw something in me. She saw promise. And so I did up to page 57 that night. And the next day I brought it back and she said, oh, that's great. And then she gave me more work, extra work. But I remember that moment because for me, it was the beginning of a feeling that I was special in the classroom, that I had a real ability to learn and to achieve, and that I could go on to do very well in my education and to reach my dreams. And I think about all of the times that y'all have made that kind of difference in the lives of these kids, and all of the opportunity that you still have. All of us just went through quite a time these last 14 months, unprecedented pandemic that we haven't seen in at least 100 years. And where so many of us, the adults especially, have done this soul searching about where we're supposed to be in life, what we can do not only for ourselves and our family, but for others. You are fortunate, you're blessed in many ways that every single day you get to serve others. And the most precious among us are children, and that you have a chance in every single encounter to make the kind of difference that that teacher made in my life. And I know that you're making in theirs. So gracias, thank you for having me today, and congratulations on a great virtual summit.
Gracias, Secretary Castro. We definitely want to have an opportunity for our audience to chime in and ask some questions. All right, let's see what our participants had to say and or ask. Let's start off with the first thought exchange comment here. It says, our students need to see more examples of people making it that look like them and perhaps have a similar background. The current audience can be that for our students. What are your comments or response to that, Secretary Castro?
Yeah, I think all of us have an opportunity to be that for young people, whether that's in the classroom and those who are educators. Every single day you are modeling, professionalism, your excellence, the way that you speak to their aspirations is so impactful. It's so important to their ability to lift their sights and to aspire themselves. And so, I agree that the folks on this Zoom have a great role to play as role models. I also think, of course, as a parent of a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old myself, that every day with our own kids, that we're powerful role models, and we have such an ability to shape their trajectory going forward. And we also, as teachers, not only do you personally have an impact on them, but also you're like a filter in how they see the world, especially at a younger age, right? And that's why I think in the curriculum that you offer, the ways that you talk about that, convey that in the way that you bring in other material that supplements what's in the actual textbook, you can have a powerful impact on allowing these kids to see themselves in people who have been successful, and to be able to dream bigger dreams and believe it more than if they didn't get exposed to that.
That's exactly right, which is why I'm honored that you're here with us, because you yourself, as you highlighted a bit, you have an incredible journey. I mean, to see, run for president, it's like amazing. So it's important for our kids to see that, like you said, so that they feel motivated and inspired themselves. Someone here highlights with regard to barriers. What do you think are the top barriers leaders face when providing an equitable education for Latino students?
Well, there are many. Just very quickly, my background, I mentioned, I went to public schools on the west side of San Antonio, and the challenge for generations has been oftentimes one of resources, especially because oftentimes from Latino families, you have students that come along and they may have greater needs, whether it's making sure that people are able to learn in a dual language setting or coming out of a home that is impoverished, or any number of other needs. And traditionally, resources have not been invested in communities the way that they should be and could be, I believe. And so some of the biggest barriers are overcoming those challenges that the students bring in. I think also it's sometimes a challenge, but always a good thing to involve families, parents, as much as possible in their child's education. I know that oftentimes is harder said than done. I've heard a lot of teachers over the years describe how challenging that can be. But it's worth the continued effort and work toward making that happen. And helping get parents of students to approach other parents, like peer-to-peer parental outreach, I have found is one of the most powerful things that we can do to get families involved. I would say the last thing I'll say is just more generally, more globally, and I think this is changing, this is starting to change, but certainly in the past and to some extent today, the Latino community still deals with stereotypes that are often limiting, whether it's in what they see in the movies or on television, or just the lack of representation, oftentimes of visible people in accomplished positions. And so you do need to do everything possible to offer the alternative to that. I know that this is very much a part of that. There's also a role for that every single day in the classroom.
All right, let's see what else we have here. What would you say to kids today trying to overcome the challenges and racism they experience in their lives? How can teachers really step up to help?
To the kids, I would say that you have people around you, your teachers, your family who loves you, who believes in you, who believes that you are special and that you can accomplish great things. And so you shouldn't let somebody else's bigotry or somebody else's problem ever shortchange you of reaching for your dreams. And the best way to show somebody that they're wrong is to focus on yourself and your education and make sure that you're able to get a great education so that opportunity will be yours. To the educators, I would say, that you have to be aware and sensitive to what students are going through. And I was a permanent substitute teacher once in the classroom for one semester, but I can't say that I have extensive experience teaching in a classroom. But I imagine that this is easier for some teachers than others. And to the educators, I would say, learn from your fellow educators. If you feel like you don't quite know how to respond to all of the conversation right now that we're having about racism, about the need for diversity, inclusion, for equity, I think that you can learn from each other. And that's okay. That's a good thing. What we want ultimately is for everybody in that classroom setting, the educators and the students, to be able to take the world as we find it, to be able to try and make some sense of it, but in a positive way for these kids, so that they leave with a greater sense of self-confidence, of belief in themselves, and on track with their education, so that they're going to have as great a future as they possibly can.
I think the other important piece to highlight here as well is teachers take advantage of the Office of African American, Latino, Gender, and Holocaust Studies, which is the incredible team that I work with. We're here to help support and provide those professional development opportunities so that you can take advantage and we can help support our students when it comes to those very sensitive topics. Let's see, it says, hello, Secretary Castro, thank you for sharing some of the great information about your own experiences. Many want to come to the college, but are afraid to, or something else. Any thoughts?
Many, I imagine the question is about students attending college, and a lot of students, especially in our Latina community, are still intimidated by that idea because oftentimes their parents did not go to college. They may be a first-generation college student. That's where it's incumbent that teachers help give them that self-confidence, and also our counselors, especially in high schools. Now, I know that counselors and teachers are often overwhelmed with any number of other things, but it makes sense to take time to focus, especially on those who would be the first in their family to go to college, because we know that they don't necessarily have that blueprint. They don't have the parent to help them along that knows the ins and outs of this. When I was mayor of San Antonio, we created something called Cafe College, which is a one-stop center in downtown San Antonio, where anybody for free could get one-on-one counseling for admissions and financial aid, because we found that the ratio of counselors to students was 420 students to one counselor in our public high schools in the city. And, we created that, but I think the main point is to help them find those resources, either in the school or somewhere else or online, to the extent that folks are connected, to fill in those gaps of information and give them the confidence that, yes, college is for them. In fact, that higher education is necessary today to be able to get a good job and to provide for their family and to reach their dreams.
Let's go to the dual language question there, because we have several dual language programs here in our school district. And so the question is, what best action can we take to promote dual language instruction? Dual is better than one.
Yeah, both of my children are going right now through dual language programs, Spanish, English programs. And I think that the biggest selling point is, the benefit to these kids of what they get of being able to speak more than one language. My mother and my grandmother grew up in a time, like I imagine some of the folks who are on the Zoom today, when if you spoke Spanish in school, you would get punished for it. Today, we live in a world where oftentimes speaking more than one language is quite an advantage in the marketplace in terms of getting a job. If you're bilingual, that's an asset. Also, study after study has shown that the study of another language is beneficial to learning generally. So those are big selling points. And I think making sure that the community understands that in the outreach that's done to parents ahead of time, before their students go into the next step, whether it's middle school or high school, making that a big part of it. Understanding that policymakers who invest resources in these programs fully understand that, from the school board to state legislators and so forth. I'm in Texas, so I know that can sometimes be difficult because I've seen it here in the Texas legislature. But there is definitely a case to be made based on the merits, based on the science, and also the testimony of students who have gone through it. I always have been a big fan as a former policymaker of when you do a policy or you have one in place and you need to make sure that it expands, you have to get those testimonials from people that have actually lived it. And y'all, I'm sure, can get great testimonials of people who have gone through these dual language programs, and now they're bilingual, or they're successful in both languages, and they're prospering because of that. Make sure that you have those stories at the ready, and that policymakers see them, and those who invest resources see them.
I appreciate you highlighting the importance of allowing our students to embrace their native language and to use it in the classroom. As a previous principal myself over dual language programs, it was always amazing to see the kids being able to just use their language, be proud of using it. And so we want to certainly continue to emphasize that. You've got a couple compliments here. It says, thank you for leading by example. How about that? You certainly are a role model for many of our kids. It says policy is the ultimate influencer. How can educators take a proactive stance for better policy?
That's a great question. I mean, there are so many different ways that folks can do that. You can do that individually by making your voice heard with those who make policy locally at the school board, as well as, of course, in Tallahassee at the state legislative level. A lot of people get involved just individually. Of course, also there are professional associations and labor organizations that also have a huge role to play at the local level and the state level in ensuring that more resources are dedicated to the education system, that educators receive the support and the resources that they need to do their jobs well. That's been particularly important as we climb out of this COVID-19 pandemic. Don't be shy about making your opinion heard, because you have a very valuable and important perspective as somebody who was sitting around that dais on the city council as a mayor and then as the housing secretary. The thing that I enjoyed hearing was people who had directly lived something. You know, we dedicate money to a program or we make certain policies, right? But that is just the beginning of the story. What's most valuable is the feedback of how that's actually working by people who are on the ground and who have to deal with those policies. So don't ever underestimate the power and the resonance of your perspective and what you have to bring to the table as an educator. It will be listened to by a lot of policymakers. I know there's some that for whatever reason may, close their ears, but I would say that the majority of policymakers take what you say seriously, even when they don't agree with the ultimate conclusion that you've drawn. It can help move them. So get involved, make your voice heard.
Get involved, make your voice heard. What a perfect way to close up this session. Thank you so much, Secretary Castro, por estar aquí con nosotros. Te lo agradezco mucho. I know you and your family are working very hard to have the museum in place in Washington. So I certainly thank you for all of that work behind the scenes, because I think it's imperative that we continue to make sure that our kids are aware of our Latino history and culture, and what better way to preserve it within a museum. So thank you for all of that work as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ms. Trejo, and to all of the educators, thank you. And best wishes. Take
Gracias.
Care. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So how fascinating is that to be able to have former Secretary Julian Castro aquí con nosotros? What an honor. Well, I'm telling you, I'm impressed with the lineup that we have today, because now we're going to transition into an amazing woman. Dolores Huerta is the founder and president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. She co-founded the United Farm Workers of America with Cesar Chavez. She's a civil rights activist, a community organizer. She has worked for labor rights and social justice for over 50 years. Not only is she an advocate for farm workers, but she's also an advocate for those that are LGBTQ, and as well as many of our minority colored groups that are underserved and marginalized. She has received so many awards, among them the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award from President Clinton in 1998. And in 2012, President Obama bestowed Dolores with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. which is the highest civilian in the United States. But first, we're going to take a look at her previous visit that she had here with us in the school district of Palm Beach County before we actually have the opportunity to speak with her directly.
This is a familiar phrase from Dolores Huerta, recipient of the Medal of Freedom and an activist who co-founded the United Farm Workers along with Cesar Chavez in 1960.
Direct nonviolent action sin violencia.
During a recent visit to John L. Lerner Community High School, leader Mrs. Huerta shared her personal journey with the students and highlighted the challenges that she endured while advocating for farm workers, women, and immigrant rights.
Instead of having anger, what I say to the students is just kind of ignore when people insult you and just have faith in yourself and keep having faith in humanity also. Just pray for those that hurt you.
Her history, I think many people have forgotten about everything she's done and the many other civil rights activists have done. And it's not that they done all of that 100 years ago. It was recently. It was in the 50s, in the 60s, and we can't forget that. We have to keep remembering where we are from and where we're coming from so we can know where we're going.
It shines a light on what's possible, and it also shines a light on the great work of the past as a forecast as to what these children can do with important causes during their lifetime.
Students from a variety of Hispanic countries had the opportunity to ask their own questions of Mrs. Huerta.
I think it's empowering for our population of Hispanics here in Palm Beach County to learn the history and to learn the story and to see someone who lived it and led it and was a part of the leadership of that because it created opportunities for Hispanics.
Mrs. Huerta, though born in the United States, remains an important influence for championing the rights of immigrants, farm workers, and for women as well. Jesus Cruz for the Education Network, keeping you informed.
Bienvenida de nuevo, Señora Huerta. Qué placer de tenerte once again. What a pleasure to have you come back. This time you're zooming back here to the School District of Palm Beach County. I hope that you are just as excited as we are to hear from you. So you are living it and you are leading it. So tell us a little bit more about what you're still doing right now.
Well, actually, our foundation, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, we're hard at work. Right. Currently, we have 100 people on the ground, canvassers that are going door to door. There's signing people up for their vaccine shots because we know that although our Latino community was hit very hard with COVID-19, we have people in our community that are not stepping up to get the vaccines. And sometimes it's a lack of transportation. A lot of times they have to make their appointments on their phones. And anyway, all these difficulties that they have. And so we're trying to make it easier for them. We're also going to be doing mobile vaccinations, going right into the neighborhood so that people can come out of their houses and get vaccinated. We're also doing a lot of food banks. Last weekend, we had 10 food banks at the same time. We gave out 70,000 pounds of food to people. And it was wonderful. We're also doing a big campaign right now to get all of our immigrant community in California, to get our undocumented community to expand healthcare to all of them. And so I would want to invite all of the teachers from California that are on the Zoom to please go to our website, doloreshuerta.org, for instructions on, and also to so that we can get instructions to people how to go out there and get postcards. We're getting emails, phone calls, and postcards to the governor asking him to please, now that we have a budget surplus in California, we want to expand healthcare to all of our undocumented people. Right now in California, undocumented are covered up to the age of 26 years old. And Governor Newsom has just announced they're going to cover people 65 years of age and over, but we're saying we want everybody to have healthcare coverage in California. So we're very lucky that we're in California, as you know, because I know so many of teachers from other states that you don't have the benefits that we have here. So we're hard at work. And of course, working on education. We are active in about 20 different school districts. We organize the parents and the students. And again, in California, we have a law that the school districts, when they get their money directly from the state, that they have to give a percentage of that money has to go to English speakers, English learners, to foster children and to low-income communities. So our committees that we form, they actually make sure that those monies are spent where they're supposed to be spent, that money goes directly to where it's supposed to be appropriated. And also they make recommendations on how the school can improve whatever issues that they have. And they've been very, very successful. Over 50% of the recommendations that our committees make, they are accepted by the different school districts. And also fighting corruption, because we know that in some school districts you have superintendents that maybe are not using the tax dollars the way that they should be. And so that they work to get rid of them and get people in there that are honest. So we've been very successful. We've also, we actually filed a lawsuit against one of our high school districts here in Bakersfield, California, where, by the way, our congressional representative is Kevin McCarthy. But we sued them for discrimination against our Black and brown students, and we won that lawsuit. And so they have to have policies and procedures to remove and get rid of the implicit bias that exists in that school district. The lawsuit that we filed was because they had expelled 2,100 students in 1 year, Black and brown students. Well, we got that expulsion rate down from 2,100 to 21. So we have been successful. We're very involved in other areas where we have large African-American populations, where we have some of the same practices that are going on. When students do something wrong in school, they refer them or take them down to the police. They have the police come and take the children out of the school. So we have actually, we've been working on that one also. And so we're very, very busy in the education issue. Also, we have a major youth organization within the Dolores Huerta Foundation. And of course, we're doing the civic action work, making sure that people get registered to vote, et cetera. So we're very busy, but thank you for asking the question.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I'd like to hear a little bit more, because I know the last time that you were here, we were talking about the curriculum and instruction, and specifically, we had a great conversation around you, Senora, about there are at times history books in general that are missing individuals such as yourself. So I know you proactively have a team that have developed curriculum materials. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how it feels, how you feel with regard to the infusion of Latino history and culture into our subject areas? Because I know that you're very passionate about ethnic studies, and here in the District of Palm Beach County, we do have that Florida statute that talks about that we should ensure our students are learning about the study of Hispanics made to the United States. So would you share a little bit about that curriculum piece that you've been working on with your team?
Yes, thank you. Yes, actually, in California, we're making real progress on this because our State Board of Education has just voted that they have to start teaching ethnic studies. And then there's another bill in the state legislature that it's going to make it a mandatory requirement for graduation, and that students have to have at least 3 credits of ethnic studies. And we know that the only way that we're going to be able to combat the racism and discrimination that exists in our society is through education. So this is very important. And even though it only applies at this point in time to people in high school, we want to keep working on that so that they can have ethnic studies down in the elementary school level also, because we know the children are not born racist, that they are made that way by their culture that they grow up in or their parents or whatever. So we know that we have to get rid of racism if we're going to have an equitable society in the United States of America. So we're really happy about the progress that we're making in terms of ethnic studies. And I do believe that there are other states where they actually have ethnic studies starting in the elementary school level. And so I would just say to all of you in our in our conference today, that this is something that all of us really, really, really need to work to make happen. Again, part of the California legislature's mandates on education is that schools have to have a welcoming atmosphere for the students. We know that so many of our students, when you do have that racism that exists, that they don't feel welcome. And sometimes this is why they don't do good in school. They don't get maybe that special touch that Julian Castro. So not all students get that little welcoming touch from a teacher that Julian Castro was just telling us about, when his teacher made him feel like he was special. Well, we have to kind of come to the point where all students will feel special. And we know that when teachers are really educated in terms of what they teach, that they can make this happen. And I say that as a former teacher myself, because I was a teacher in elementary school. And I remember when, as a teacher, you know which of your students are having issues or problems. And that is one thing that somehow we as teachers, we can see what is going on with our students, but oftentimes we don't have the support. And so we've actually worked very, very hard to get additional funding for teachers, because we know that teachers need smaller class sizes, they need more counselors, they need more school nurses. They need the kind of support system that unfortunately so many of our teachers do not have. So our foundation has actually worked with a coalition of other organizations where we've actually been able to bring billions of dollars into our school system by passing propositions. We have passed a proposition in California where if you're a millionaire, you have to pay more in state taxes. If you make a $500,000, $500,000 a year, you also have to pay more in state taxes. If you make $250,000, you actually have to pay more. And it's not a lot. It's like 1%, 2%, 3%, depending on how much money that you make. But that is one thing that we really have to put on our agenda, that we've got to start lobbying and passing more laws to bring in more funding into our school system, so that teachers can do the job that they have to do, but they can't do it if they have students that are troubled in their classroom and there's no way that they can address these issues of the students that they have. And in terms of the ethnic studies, it's so important that we teach to every child where racism comes from. We know that it comes from slavery. And we know that the indigenous people were the first slaves in the United States of America. And of course, the Africans that were brought here in slavery that are still suffering today from the vestiges of slavery. And it's not only just the workers, because a lot of people, like in many of the states that are here today, like Texas and Florida, you have these right to work laws that make it very difficult for workers to organize. So not paying workers the amount of money that they should get paid for their work, this is a segment of slavery also. Because what does slavery mean? It means that people should use their energy and their life to make other people rich. Well, that's wrong. And of course, that also translates to women also. So women are also supposed to, in a home, cook and clean, take care of the children, do the shopping, be a chauffeur, and then not paid for their work, but not even respected for their work. And so we know that, again, this is something we have to get rid of, this whole idea that people should not be respected for the work that they do, which comes, again, from slavery. And when it comes to the immigration issues, I just love to talk about this, because I say to people, Google a map of the United States before 1848. And when you look at that map, it's kind of a shocker, because you see 1/3 of the United States was Mexico. So when they say to all of the Mexican Americans out there, go back where you came from, we can say, hey, we were here before the United States was the United States, okay? And we have to just remind people that the first immigrants that came to our United States were from Europe. The Europeans are the true immigrants that came to the United States. So when you talk about North America, the continent of South America, the indigenous people of these two continents, okay, they are the ones that are the true, you might say, people of these continents, but also of the United States of America. So they should never be treated or dealt like they are strangers, because they are strangers in their own land, so to speak. So we have a lot of work to do in making this curriculum, part of what we teach in our classrooms. And as I said before, I think that education, this is the basis of how we can start teaching every single person in the United States that racism is wrong, that racism is a construct. It's a word that should never be used. And the word race, by the way, should always be attached to the word human. That's the only time we should use the word race. Otherwise, we should use the word ethnic. We have a lot of different ethnic groups. We have a lot of different cultures. We have a lot of different nationalities, but we only have one human race. And if there's anything else that I would beg you to do, teach your children, we only have one human race. And our human race came from Africa. So we are all descendants of Africa. And as we know, when our population traveled across the planet, people got lighter in skin, got different color hair, different color eyes. But at the end of the day, we are all Homo sapiens. We are one human race. So we have to become the messengers to share that message. And that way we can say to the white supremacists, to the KKK, to the neo-Nazis, hey, get over it, okay? Because we are all Africans. Just share that. Take that to the dinner table. And the other thing too, in addition to that, we have to fight for the curriculum for gender studies, so that little girls will learn from the time that they're very young that they are equal to the boys, and that they were not born to serve or to be advocates for others than themselves. And so I think that's also an important issue that we have to start including in our curriculums. And by the way, we have in the U.S. Senate right now, we have the Equal Rights Amendment that is now being considered to be part of the Constitution of the United States of America. Can you imagine that? In the Constitution, there will be language that says women are equal to men. So I just want to ask all of you, especially in those states like Texas and Florida, and some of those states, to please contact your senator. Contact your senators and ask them to please vote for the Equal Rights Amendment for women, vote for Voter Protection Act, S1. That's the name of the bill in the Senate right now. And of course, for immigration reform. So we have a lot of work to do. And so we also have to include in our curriculums civic studies. Yeah, I remember when I was in the third grade and we read about the Bill of Rights, and I thought, oh my God, this is how our country protects us. I remember that to this day, this feeling that I had of power, knowing that I had a government that really protected us. Well, a lot of times people don't know that. They don't know, people don't understand what democracy is, how important civic engagement is, how important voting is. And so we've got to include this also in all of our curriculums. So we have a lot of work to do. I think the teachers out there, you have to kind of be the mechanics that are going to fix whatever's wrong with our human society right now in the United States of America. But I do know that you can do it. And not only the racism, the misogyny, the homophobia. And I would also say, and you can include this as part of your lessons, talk about Benito Juarez, the Mexican president of Mexico, the first indigenous president of Mexico, because he had these wonderful words that we should have them in every classroom. El respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Respecting other people's rights is peace. So if you fall in love with somebody of your own sex, or marry them, or live with them, that is your human right to do that. And always tell our young women, our little girls, your body is your body and nobody else's body. Nobody has the right to tell you what to do with your body, okay? And that, of course, applies to women's right to abortion. So as I say that as a mother of 11 children, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Respecting other people's rights is peace. That is such an important lesson. So I know as teachers, you are more than teachers. you set the philosophies of your children just the way that I did. I learned from my teachers and got so much other philosophies from them. And so, because you are the framers of their minds, you set their values for them, and you have so much work to do. And as Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, education is the soul of our nation. When they tried to take money out of the education budget during World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our president, said, no, we will not take one dime out of education. We will not take one dime out of our libraries, because education is the soul of our nation. So we have to wake up that soul and get busy and to make it happen. So I know I've said a lot, but I want to thank you so much for giving me this time and for inviting me to this very, very important session.
Absolutely. We definitely need to wake up the souls. I know there's a lot of souls right now that are just wanting to ask their questions. So we're going to give them the opportunity to participate in thought exchange so that we can go through them and see what they have to say. Go ahead, James. All right, let's see what questions we have for La Señora Huerta. What has been your most difficult lesson as a lifelong activist?
One of the things that was very hard for me to learn was to stand up for myself. I think, like a lot of women, we were so socialized that we have to give credit to other people, that we have to support other people, and that sometimes it's hard for us to take credit for the work that we do, or to because women get attacked. They say, oh, well, she's being conceited, and they call us all kinds of names. But I finally learned how to do that. And I remember once one of my friends, he actually was a retired priest, and said, no, you got to start standing up for yourself. I never had problems speaking up or giving my ideas, because my mother always told me, never be afraid to speak up. But the other thing was, I had to learn how to take credit for the work that I did. So I guess to become a true feminist is that you sometimes have to question traditions, and know that when you do question traditions, that it's not going to backfire on you, and that it'll actually help you.
Wow, that's exactly right. I'm going to bring in my co-host, Connor. Connor, you want to go ahead and read the next one?
Hello. Inspiration. What is your greatest single source of inspiration?
Well, I think what inspires me to keep being an activist is just all of the issues that we have in front of us that need to be dealt with, and learning how to organize. Because when you learn how to organize, you learn that there's a way to solve problems. And the way that you solve problems is by getting people together and taking direct nonviolent action. And so I think that's been my inspiration, because I see that so many issues that confront us, that there are solutions, but we shouldn't wait for anybody to come and solve those issues for us. The people that are affected by the solution, they have the answers, but we have to show them how to organize, how to get together, and to take direct nonviolent action. And of course, I learned that from my mentor, Mr. Fred Roth Sr., Mr. Fred Roth Sr., but who, by the way, I saw that Sylvia Mendez is also on our session here today. And he's the one that actually organized the people there in that lawsuit that they had when the Latinos and whites were segregated into separate schools. He organized them to fight that battle, which they finally won with their lawsuit that they had. So he's the one that taught me that lesson. And that's why I stopped being a teacher to become an organizer, because once that I learned, hey, there is a way to get farm workers out of poverty by helping them get organized and take direct action. And of course, that's what we did when Necessity and I formed the Farm Workers Union. So I think it's the people out there that I know that we can go out there and organize them, and they are the ones that inspire me.
Wow, okay. What is something you are seeing that is different about today's youth that inspires you and gives you hope?
Well, we have seen this all over the country and all over the world, where young people are coming out there and they're protesting. I know during this next Memorial Day weekend. This is when George Floyd was killed. And when you see all of those young people of all different ethnic groups that are out there fighting for racial justice and that are protesting against policemen's conduct, that is so amazing. And then the young people from Florida, they're Emma Gonzalez, the young people from Parkland that are out there marching against gun violence, and the young people that are out there fighting for climate justice. And when you see all of these young folks that are out there, and the one thing that the young people are so lucky because they now have the devices that we never had, the social media platforms like Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, and that they can communicate with each other and they can mobilize so quickly. So I think this is a very, very important moment in our society right now. And I think the young people are actually leading the way, like the dreamers, who said they were unafraid to come out and say they were undocumented until they were able to get the right to stay in this country and get their education.
Thank you. The next one is, I want to know, did any events happen in your childhood that inspired you to fight for their rights?
Yes, a couple of events. I mean, in terms of my own personal events that happened to myself, because I grew up in a very ethnically diverse neighborhood. My friends were Black, they were Asian, Filipino, Japanese, Chinese, and the police were always harassing us because they didn't like to see people of different ethnic groups mixed together. Especially we had a lot of our white friends that would hang out with us, and especially white women. And so the police were always harassing us. So that really instilled in me a lot of anger about the way that we were being treated just because we happened to be people of color. And so I think that that anger that I had, I always felt that we had to do something. And as I said before, once I learned that you can actually do something about it, then I think that really made me kind of more inclined to be an activist. And the other thing too is with farm workers, seeing the way that the farm workers were treated when they're working so hard, not being paid enough, seeing the poverty that they were living in. And when I saw that, I just felt, no, we have to do something about this. And luckily, Cesar Chavez felt the same way. He and I met in an organization called the Community Service Organization, and we left that group to start the United Farm Workers. So again, seeing other people being mistreated. And my mother always taught us growing up that when you see people that need help, and if there's any way that you can help them, you have an obligation to do so. And that's kind of been the mantra of my life.
All right, let's take a look at that question there with regards to educators. What would you say to educators who are afraid to take a risk and raise their voice for equity?
Oh my God, this is something, and I'm going to say this because I know, having been a school teacher myself, I know that educators don't have a lot of free time. You have so much work to do just in the classroom, but if we could have more educators in the community speaking out, that would make such a difference. And so that's why I think that we have to fight to get more funding for our educational system, because our teachers should be the leaders in our community. They really are the ones that you might say they are at the heart and the soul of what is happening. But so often we do not have teachers. Again, I know because of their limitations on their time, they have to devote so much time to the classroom. Doesn't leave people a lot of personal time for their families, but we need teachers' voices and we need teachers' leadership in our communities. And so I would just implore all the teachers out there, whatever you can do to get out and lend your voice on these major community issues that we are fighting right now, it would be so wonderful.
Wow, you are absolutely right. Thank you so much, Senora Huerta. We've run out of time and we could continue to have these passions, but thank you for being here with us. I hope that you'll continue to always come back, and we really do appreciate all the work that you're doing all across this wonderful nation. Gracias, Senora.
Thank you very much. And please, especially for teachers out there in Texas and in Florida, you've got to raise your voices because we need you right now. And especially against these voter suppression acts. And again, I want to ask everybody out there, please call your senators and tell them to vote for S1, the John Lewis bill that we need out there. So whatever kind of laws they pass in Texas and in Florida to suppress the vote, if we can pass S1, it will make all of those state legislatures, whatever they do to try to suppress our vote, it will make them nil, okay? So it's Michael Moore said in his Broadway show, when we wake up in the morning, we wash our face, we brush our teeth, and then we call our senator. Okay, so if you can do that and get it out to all of the people that you know so that we can pass these bills, S1, the For the People Act to protect the vote, Equal Rights Amendment for women, okay, to have that in our Constitution. And of course, we do want immigration reform eventually. And for those of you in California, please go to our website, DoloresHuerta.org, so that you can help us with Assembly Bill 4 to get so we can get health care for our undocumented population in California. You go to our website, DoloresHuerta.org, or go to change.org to get a petition, because we've got to get these petitions into the governor's office before June the 5th. Okay? Si se puede, everybody. We can make it happen.
Sí se puede.
You.
Gracias.
Thank you.
All right, now we are excited to have Dr. Roberto Alvarez from the Lemongrove Incident. He's going to tell us a little bit about that personal journey that his family went through. But first, Roberto Alvarez is a social cultural anthropologist whose career and life have been guided by a commitment to social justice and the empowerment of underserved communities. This stems from both his personal history growing up along the United States-Mexican border and from his experience in a broad range of social change contexts. Dr. Roberto Alvarez, welcome.
Thank you very much. Wow, what an act to follow. I'm so privileged. I feel so privileged to be on the Institute following Dolores Huerta, one of my heroines, and also Julian Castro too. This is really a true honor to me. As you mentioned, I was an ethnic studies professor, and one of the things that we do in ethnic studies is to correct history in many ways, and I think that Dolores mentioned that very clearly. And today I want to talk to you about. Let me thank first Patricia. She's very persistent in getting me on this, and also the Palm Grove School District and everybody else who's on the Zoom today. But I'm changing the tenure here a little bit because I'm going to talk about a historical situation that occurred to my father, to my family, to my community. And I also want to emphasize the fact and the importance of those aspects of our culture, family, community, parientes, our social relationships. So I'm going to be speaking about the first desegregation court case in the history of the United States. The first court case was named after my father, Roberto Alvarez versus the Trustees of the Lemongrove School District. And as I mentioned, it was the first successful desegregation court case. It happened in a small community of Lemongrove in 1931. Lemongrove is just a few miles out of San Diego, California, and also a few miles, maybe 15 or so miles away from the Mexican border. So what I want to do is talk about the school case briefly, but also I want to contextualize it in the period of the time, what was going on at that period of time, what were the kinds of things that were similar to what was happening today, and talk about the community and talk about the families that were engaged in this historical struggle. This case was not well known. In fact, it was never really known about, and it occurred during a period of immigration. The case, I discovered the case when I was doing my PhD dissertation research I had been in the Peace Corps. Well, I was in the Peace Corps, and as a volunteer, I had wanted to go back and study and the people that I had worked with in Panama. And when I was doing my comprehensive examinations, I had to study the immigration literature. And doing that, I realized that the immigration literature was lacking. It really upset me because they talked about people as being pawns, people being moved here and moved there, and it didn't really tell the story of the individuals, the families, and of the experiences that migrants face. This picture here is a picture of my my father's mother's family. She's the woman on the left-hand side, Ramona Castillanos, Alvarez, and this is her mother was in the middle there. It was interesting that at this period of time in 1906, when they were coming to Lemongrove, each time they had a child, they would go back to Mexico to make sure that they would be born in Mexico to be Mexican citizens. Could I have the next slide, please? So I want to tell you a little bit about the immigration. This was a different type of an immigration for these folks. It happened over a period of some 20 years. People started crossing the border around 1900 into San Diego and into Lemongrove. But this map here is Baja California, which is the extension of the state of California. And all those little towns that you see along the way there were almost all mines. So that when people left, they left home. For instance, my dad's parents left San Jose del Cabo. His mother was born in Comondú, and they moved north very slowly and stopped at these different places, sometimes for a year, sometimes 2 years. And the reason this is important is because people got to know each other on the way. They formed relationships. Sometimes they even intermarried, and different people were born. My grandfather was born in Las Flores. My mother's mother was born in El Alamo, and my mom was born in Calexico, California. So this was a staged migration. It was a slow migration, something very different from the types of migration that we see today. And people crossed the border really easily. Sometimes they crossed the border and then would come back to pay the $8 head tax that was required at that period of time. Grab the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, people met each other on the way north. And here's my grandmother, Ramona Castillanos, and my grandfather, Ursino Alvarez. They met in this town called Calmaí, but they got married in San Diego around 1916. And there were lots of marriages, intermarriages from people from Baja California. There were some maybe 50 or so families that came from Baja California. It's also from other areas of Mexico, from Sonora, from the mainland Mexico. But the bulk of the families that came to Lemongrove were from Baja California. So they knew each other from the long trek coming up the peninsula. There were lots of marriages and lots of children. When I grew up, there was hordes of kids in Lemongrove. The Bonilla family had 11 children. Lieras had 11 children. There were lots of intermarriages. So it was a very large and group of parientes, of family, cousins, and so on. The next slide, please. Anyway, when I finished my dissertation, I wrote it up, and I was lucky to have it published. And it was really about this immigration of a familia. I interviewed most of my relatives that I could. I thought that I had known them before I did this, but I really learned something about the community and about the people and what they did. And one of the things that I learned about was the Lemongrove Incident. And we called it the Lemongrove Incident because nobody knew about it. Nobody knew about this case. When my dad was growing up, when I was growing up, there was never mention about it at all. But when I did my research, which was interesting, people kept referring to the school case, the school thing, this thing that happened at the school. So when I finished my dissertation, I went, got a job, and then I got a small grant, and I had my sister help me, and we went and did research on the actual school case. And we called it the Lemongrove Incident at the time because no one knew about it. Next slide, please. So let me tell you a little bit of, this is Lemongrove in 1905. You can see that it's pretty rural, lots of lemon orchards. There was one school in the community. There was a packing shed for lemons where people could get work. There was also a mining quarry so that people coming from Baja California who had experienced the mines had both the lemon orchards as well as the packing shed. Women worked in the packing house. There was a train that went through Lemongrove, and also the rock quarry, which was a mine. My dad's father, Ursino Alvarez, was killed in that mine. He was a blaster, and when my dad was 1 year old, he was killed there, and the mining company gave him my grandmother, she got a house on North Avenue, which is close to the place where a new school was going to be built for the Mexican kids. The next slide, please. So this is the school, in 1905. But let me backtrack just a little bit. I want to give you just a little bit of some of these figures about what it was like in California at the time. In 1900, the census registered some 103,000 Mexicans that were born in the United States. And this is about the time that people were beginning to arrive in Lemongrove. By 1930, 1 year before the school case, Mexicans in the United States had increased from 103,000 to 640,000. California attracted Mexicans because of the growing fields in the central part of California, of the state, as well, and exactly what happened in Lemongrove. By 1930, 25% of all Mexicans in the United States lived in California. And we hear the same arguments that we hear today were given at that period of time. Mexicans were taking our jobs. Mexicans are on welfare. Mexicans had health issues, and they weren't paying their share of taxes. These were the arguments that we heard then, and the arguments that we hear today as well. The population explosion was especially evident in Los Angeles. In 1900, Los Angeles' Mexican population numbered around 3,000 to 5,000 people. By 1930, it had exploded to 150,000. The records indicate that Mexican population in the United States between 1910 and 1930 quadrupled from 319,000 to over 1,250,000. So this happened at a period of time that we know, remember 1930, of increasing economic instability. The Great Depression came and spurred a great and strong native sentiment against not only Mexicans, but all immigrants. Mexicans were seen as a monolithic group. They couldn't assimilate. They spoke Spanish. They lived in poverty. They caused health problems. They carried social problems. These were the kinds of issues that they were facing at the period of time. Another issue that's really important during this period of time was that there were Americanization schools throughout the state of California and in some of the other southwestern states. The so-called Americanization schools were really schools for Mexican children, and most of them were pretty inferior compared to the schools for the Euro-American kids. For example, in South Tapala, California, the Mexican school had 950 students with only 8 classrooms and 2 bathrooms. The Euro-American school in the same city had 600 students. They had 21 classrooms, 21 classrooms, a cafeteria, training offices, and numerous bathrooms. So what happened? In 1929, the stock market crashed, sending waves of panic through the public. Public officials demanded that native-born workers be given available jobs, employers fired Mexicans and refused to employ them. In Ventura and Santa Barbara, the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, harassed and intimidated Mexicans. And in 1931, the California legislature passed a law that made it illegal for companies doing business with the state to hire citizens of another country. The logic of Americanization and separation of Mexican-American children, however, goes back much further. Here you have, can we have the previous slide, please? Okay, these were the students that were segregated at the Lemongrove School. On January 5th of 1931, these children were not allowed in the school. The school board had built a new school, a quote unquote new school, in the Mexican part of town. The kids called it La Caballeriza, the barn. And the parents did not allow their kids to attend that school. They went to the Mexican consulate, who was very helpful, and helped them get 2 lawyers to fight the case in the Superior Court of California. In this picture, most of these folks here are long gone, but most of them are related to me. The young girl right here in the middle with the long braids is my mom, Maria Smith Alvarez. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the other kids in the class, in the school. These are the Anglo kids primarily, but interestingly, my father, Roberto Alvarez, was a very good student, and he spoke really good English. One of the reasons he was chosen as a litigant for the Lemongrove school case. He's standing in this picture in the second from the top row on the very far right, the little guy there on the right. As you notice too, there were a couple of Japanese American students that were with these groups of students. However, even though my dad was with those students in that classroom, he too was not allowed to enter the school. I could have the next slide, please. So this is my dad, Roberto Alvarez, just about the time of the school case. As I said, he spoke English well, and he was a really good student. So they chose him to be the litigant. He testified in court, and ultimately the judge ruled in favor of the Mexican community and actually said it was a case of segregation. When the case ended, my dad was told by his parents to be humble, to not go around bragging about the fact that they had won over the school board. And my dad always said it was not about him. It was really about the parents, about his mother, his father, his relatives, and all the community. They formed a Comité de Vecinos de Lemongrove, a neighbors committee of Lemongrove that organized and fought the school case. Next slide, please. This is Ramona Castillanos, my grandmother. You saw her picture at her wedding picture. But the way I found out about the case was that when I was asking my dad about what is the school thing, and he said, oh, something that happened when I was a kid, when I was 12 years old. But your grandmother saved some papers. And he showed me these papers, these documents that my grandmother was wise enough to save. Included were the school board minutes that illustrated what the school board was doing, as well as several newspaper articles from the San Diego Bee, the San Diego Sun, and letters that they had written to the La Opinión, which is the largest Spanish-speaking newspaper in the country in Los Angeles. She and the Gonzalez family and others were instrumental in going to the consulate and bringing the case to court. Next slide, please. Once I was researching the case, we went to the Superior Court of California to look for the writ of mandate that was the record of the court case. Back in those days, this was like in the 1970s, so back in those days there were not any digital kinds of records. And this case, the writ of mandate, the actual writ of mandate, was already deteriorating and could barely be read. We took it, and at the time there were no computers either, so we took it and retyped it. And from that writ of mandate, I learned about the details of the court case. And the next slide, please. So what I want to do now is put this into context. What I think it's really important is that, and I learned this over time, is that this was not just an incident. This was a part of a larger social movement of desegregation in the history of the United States. And I just want to briefly go through this for you. Most of us realize that segregation is a result of the separate but equal laws that were called Jim Crow laws that resulted from the Plessy versus Ferguson case in 1896. Homer Plessy, a man of about 30 years old, he was on a Louisiana train, and he rode in the white car rather than riding in the black car, and was forced to get off, and he went to court, and they fought the court case, but the judges ruled in favor of the state of Louisiana, saying that it was constitutional to be able to separate blacks from white people as long as things were separate but equal. Well, the basis of that case, even though this case itself was not an educational case, it did have its foundations in education, which is interesting. In 1849, a man named Roberts, Mr. Roberts, sued the city of Boston. He wanted his daughter, she was a black child, he wanted her to attend a school, but they wouldn't let her because at the time Massachusetts was a segregated state and did not have had separate schools for blacks and for whites. When the judge ruled, he ruled very narrowly and basically left the decision up to the school. And the school basically said, we're going to stay with the separate but equal cause. And that cause, that basically separate but equal, became the basis for the Plessy versus Ferguson case. And then also, obviously, for the Jim Crow laws in the United States. I often refer to this as both Jim Crow, but also Jose Crow, because throughout the entire Southwest, Mexicans were faced by separate but equal laws. And they were also fighting those laws. The very first case that I know of was in 1925, Adolfo Romo versus William Laird in Tempe, Arizona. Adolfo Romo sued the city of Tempe, the school district of Tempe, because there were two schools. One was the white school I think it was on 10th Street, and the other was on 17th Street or something like that, but they were separated and all the Mexicans were in one school. He sued the district because they claimed that they were not receiving the equal education. The teachers at the Mexican school were not certified teachers. So what happened was that they realized this, they went to court, and the case was actually won by Mr. Romo and his children. But what the school did was they basically hired certified teachers and maintained the Mexican school separate from the white school. That was in 1925. In 1930, Jesus Salvatierra in Texas sued the Del Rio Independent School District. The schools that were bilingual were separated primarily because of Spanish and also because of ethnicity. They won the case, but in a further appeal, the judge ruled against Salvatierra, so they lost the case. Then came 1931, and Roberto Alvarez versus the Lemongrove School Board, the district, and became the very first desegregation court case in the United States. I know we're going to be hearing very soon about the Mendez case from Sylvia Mendez, who I'm very honored to be on this Zoom with. And but I also want to say that the Lemongrove case, even though I thought people didn't know about it, there were people throughout Los Angeles, and if you have to recall that there was lots of interaction between these different areas through the newspapers, through the associations of Mexicanos in the state and in the Southwest that communicated the success of Lemongrove. So I was really wrong initially by calling it an incident, because what it was a part of this greater movement, this greater social movement of desegregation. And finally, of course, we have Brown versus the board, which the Mendez case was incredibly influential on, as I'm sure we'll hear.
So let's go ahead and start with asking that question with regard to so much of the history you have just shared with us is underappreciated in today's education system. How can we change that? How can we inspire teachers and students to shine a spotlight on our history?
That's a really very good question. And I think that Dolores Huerta emphasized it in regards to ethnic studies. In this situation, I was trying to set the record straight that there is a history that's left out. And as we know, historians often write the histories from their own perspective. And we have very few of our own historians. And this is growing, of course, and there's lots of different kinds of history that's coming out that we haven't known about. So I think ethnic studies, training our teachers, training students to do the research and investigate the kind of history that has not been exposed before is incredibly important. This was what happened with me. I was a grown man in graduate school, and I knew nothing about the Lemongrove Incident, about my father's role in Roberto Alvarez versus the Lemongrove School District, or about the school case, or about the family's organization. And this is something that illustrates the strength of the community. So it's really important to think about ethnic studies in this way and to think about our history, not to question our history, and to look at the kinds of things that instruct us and inspire us in these ways.
Thank you. And the next one is going to be, what inspires you in today's school system that makes you believe things are changing for the better?
There's a lot more people being educated, a lot more ethnic folks being educated. There's been a lot more equity in schools, but we still have a long, long way to go. I think what's happening now is that there's new types of segregation occurring throughout the United States. The whole idea of private schools instead of public schools. But I know that one of the things that's really been inspiring to me as a professor is that most of the students that I taught were first generation students coming from a variety of backgrounds who had never been to college, their families had never been to college, people who are immigrants who are barely making it their way. I had undocumented students who were excelled in school. And this is what really inspired me, because I saw the potential and the worth that each of us have, that each student has, what they can offer to the country and to education and to our social system.
So this is most definitely very informative. This history is not taught as it happened. This information should be introduced to the masses. We should all be aware of these educational challenges of the past. Your thoughts on that statement?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think that is so important is that For instance, this school case is not very well known. And it's known, and it was not known even to the people who, my generation. We made a film about this case, and with the film, people not only started recognizing, but they began to embrace it. I had the Lemongrove School here named the auditorium after my dad, Roberto Alvarez Auditorium. And when they inaugurated that, the school board came together and I gave a talk. And the school board, and I was able to, there were still people who were alive from the school case. They came to the talk and to the inauguration. And the school board actually got up and embraced me. And they were embracing the case. I cried, and I think there were a lot of other people that shed tears. But it illustrates, the importance of sharing these things, these histories, with everyone.
Wow, what an honor, right? To
Yes,
celebrate
absolutely.
and to ensure that he's remembered. There was a question in the chat box with regard to the name of the film. What is the name of the film?
The film is called The Lemongrove Incident.
The Lemongrove Incident.
Thank
you, Dr.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alvarez. We appreciate you and for being here and sharing your family's incredible journey as they made an impactful contribution to our United States educational system. And as you said, there was another pivotal case that was just instrumental in making a significant contribution also in the education system. So we're going to transition into now Sylvia Mendez with the Mendez versus Westminster case. Please help me welcome Sylvia Mendez, who in 2001 was the first Mendez school that was dedicated in Santa Ana, California on behalf of her family. In 2004, President Bush told the Mendez story during the Hispanic Heritage Celebration in the East Room. In 2005, Sylvia was inducted into the Hall of Fame at Santa Ana College, and in 2007, she was selected as one of the Hot 25 persons in Orange County. In 2010, President Barack Obama mentioned Sylvia during the Women's History Month speech, and in 2011, Sylvia was awarded the Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama. Sylvia also received several Lifetime Achievement Awards and certificates of recognition for her efforts to advocate for education. So before we have a conversation with her, we would like to go ahead and highlight the journey that her family went through.
Segregation was widely accepted in the United States in the 1940s. Mexicans and other minorities were denied access to restaurants, swimming pools, movie theaters, and even schools. So when Sylvia Mendez, a 9-year-old of Mexican and Puerto Rican descent, tried to register at an all-white school in California, she was denied.
I loved it. Manicured lawn and that beautiful palm trees and the playground. Never forget the playground.
Sylvia and her brothers were told they had to attend the Mexican school, 2 wooden shacks on a dirt lot next to a cow pasture. Sylvia's parents, Gonzalo and Felicitas, had abandoned their education in order to help support their families. Now they wanted to give their children the education they had been denied. Sylvia's father complained.
And the next day he went and spoke to the principal, and he was informed, we don't allow Mexicans here. And then the following day he went and spoke to the superintendent of schools there in Westminster, and he says, no, you can't go there. And then he went to this Orange County School Board and spoke to him. And that's when he was informed that 4 cities had decided to build separate schools for the Mexicans, and we had to go to the Mexican school.
And in those schools, no matter how smart you were, how gifted you were, how able you were going to be treated to an industrial education.
The Mendez family take their savings and hire a civil rights attorney, David Marcus. He had recently won a lawsuit on behalf of Mexican Americans in nearby San Bernardino.
My parents weren't just fighting for us, because when they went and spoke to the superintendents, they said, Gonzalo, if you stop this lawsuit or whatever you're thinking about, your children can go to the school. And my father said, no, I'm not gonna stop this. I'm not just fighting for my children, I'm fighting for all the children.
Gonzalo and Felicitas decided that they would help to pay. Well, they ended up paying virtually everything, paying the lawyer, as well as paying their friends to take a day off of work and pay for their work.
Sylvia's father convinces 4 other Mexican families to unite and join their lawsuit. The most shocking testimony came when James L. Kent, the superintendent of the Garden Grove School District, took the stand and said he believed people of Mexican descent were intellectually, culturally, and morally inferior to European Americans. Even if a Latino child had the same academic qualifications as a white child, he would never allow them to enroll in a white school.
That superintendent had written a thesis and said how Mexicans were immoral, how we were dirty, how we had bugs in us, and how we did not belong in a white school.
2 weeks of testimony continues. No one can predict the outcome since segregation is so rampant and accepted in the country. The Mexican community argues separate is not equal. On February 18, 1946, after an 8-month deliberation, Judge Paul J. McCormick makes a landmark ruling in favor of Mendez.
The judge made a very interesting take in his judgment in which he said segregated schools are unconstitutional. He said what segregated schools do is that they create inequality when there is none. And this is a violation of the 14th Amendment.
But it wasn't over. The Westminster School District filed an appeal. The case had drawn national attention. And this time, when the trial resumed, they had the support of the NAACP, the League of United Latin American Citizens, the Japanese American Citizens League, and the World Jewish Congress. On April 14, 1947, the judges in the Court of Appeals in San Francisco ruled in favor of the Mendez family again. Following the court decision, Governor Earl Warren signs a law that allows all children in California to go to school together, regardless of race, ethnicity, or language. The Mendez versus Westminster School District case paved the way for desegregation of schools in America. 7 years later, Brown versus the Board of Education desegregated schools in the entire country. Sylvia went on to graduate college and didn't think much about her family's court case until decades later after her father died and her mother became seriously ill.
And it wasn't until she was dying that I retired just to take care of her. And she said, Sylvia, somebody has to go out there and talk about the story. This is history of the United States, and you have to go out there and start talking about these brave Latinos, how they stood up against the establishment and fought, and how they won, and how California was the first state to be integrated. History of California, it cannot be forgotten. And we did it. We fought and we won, she said.
For more than 25 years, she's been doing just that, speaking at schools and even before the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights.
No one knows about this case, Mendez versus Westminster, how 5 families fought,
What Sylvia Mendez is doing is very important. That is, not allowing for this important change that occurred to be forgotten.
Outraged that their daughter had to attend a segregated school, Sylvia's parents linked arms with other Latino families to fight injustice in a California federal court.
In 2011, Sylvia was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Obama, and she couldn't hold back the tears.
I was crying because finally somebody had realized what my parents had done. That Medal of Freedom was all about the fight that the 5 families and my parents, how they stood up against the establishment, and how they fought, and how they never even got it. Gracias, Gonzalo, gracias, Ramirez, gracias, Guzman, gracias, Palomino, for what they had done. And then there it was, finally being given to us, the Medal of Freedom, showing that, that they had done the right thing.
Today, there are 2 schools and a library named after Sylvia's parents, and the community of Westminster recently voted to erect a monument in their honor.
We're putting together a monument of Gonzalo Mendez and just celebrating what happened, the breakthrough the community had, and the challenges we overcame, and to show the community what's possible.
We can fight bigotry, we can fight injustice, we can fight anything that's coming and hurled at us. Because if we all unite, everybody will join you. And that's what I tell students. If you stand up for something that's right, people will join you and they will help you because they know what is right and we all know what is wrong.
Sylvia continues to use her own money and resources in telling her story. She hopes that by educating the public about her family's legal victory over 70 years ago, it will spark change for Latinos today. For Sylvia Mendez, La lucha sigue. On behalf of the Board of Directors and the staff of the United States Leadership Institute and our 36th National Conference, we salute you.
La lucha sigue. Help me welcome la señora Sylvia Mendez. What an honor to have you. Bienvenida.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to tell the story. I hope everybody was able to see the video. We have come a long way since Brown versus the Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas. I must tell you, my dream is finally coming true. Mendez is being recognized all over the United States, and my goal is to have it taught in all the schools, not only in California, but in all the schools. And I remember my mother saying, Sylvia, just like I said, nadie sabe de este caso. Nobody knows about this case, how we fought. And it wasn't just for you, Sylvia. It was for all the children. And she said, somebody has to go out and tell it. I said, I can't. I'm a RN. I'm a registered nurse. I'm not used to going out in front of a class and saying, she said, somebody has to tell the story about this incident. It's history of the United States. And it was that day that I promised my mother that I would go around the country. And yes, it's been over 20 years that I have been going around the country, and still, just like the Alvarez case, people are not aware about Mendez or the Alvarez case. So Mr. Alvarez, you have to continue to talk about it. Yes, you have to, because that's the only way people will know that Latinos have played a very instrumental part in history and education. And yes, Mendez is all about the equal struggle for equal education and basic human rights. It caused the desegregation of public schools in California, and it set the stage for Brown versus the Board of Education, where the Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren would lead the county just as they had done in Mendez when he desegregated all of the country. And Mendez was a case that was fought not just like we saw, not by one family, not by one person, by hundreds of people of different ethnic backgrounds and nationalities. And I was one of those students for which it was fought for. And I am just a storyteller here in Mendez versus Westminster, because it was my parents who did all the work. And you can't believe how shocked I was when I started going around the country and found out we were more segregated now than we were in 1945 by de facto segregation. So Mendez and Brown is all about de jure. By law, they can't segregate us, but now we are segregated by de facto, and that's caused by so many evils that I know that it's studied in school, and sometimes it's just so hard. Students ask me, how do we get rid of de facto segregation? Well, that is a really good problem. I say a good thing for all our college students to start working on. How do we get rid of poverty? How do we get rid of all the injustice that goes on in this world? So yes, we do have segregation, but it has become my whole aim just to go around the country and talk to students about the importance of education, because that is what's going to give them the American dream. And yes, there's American dream, and yes, you have to work hard for it, and it's not given to you. It becomes very hard, especially for me. I was not an A student, so to become a registered nurse, I had to work very hard, stay up all night trying to study so I could become a registered nurse, and eventually I retired as assistant nursing director of a hospital. And yes, students, you can do it. There's nothing that can keep you from becoming that leader, from becoming the governor of California, I always say, from becoming the president of the United States. So students, it is so important. And that's what my whole intent of going around talking to students about is for them to have and live this American dream that we all are living right now. And yes, it was Marcus, the Jewish lawyer, that helped us. He had been fighting for other cases, like it said in the video. He had fought for the case where we weren't even allowed to go to a public park. In 1944, he fought that case, Marcus, and he won that case. So we could at least go into public parks. So on March 2nd, yes, my parents and four other families, that was Guzman, Frank Palomino, Tomas Estrada, and Lorenzo Ramirez, they filed the lawsuit in federal court. And yes, the court district, yes, they appealed it. And then on April 1947, the United States Circuit Court of Appeal unanimously went in our favor, voted in our favor. And I, along with thousands of other Latinos, started to go into integrated schools. And so Mendez is very important, because after that, our governor, who had sent his attorney general to help Mendez, went ahead and integrated all of California. And he signed the laws that would make California the first state to have integration in the United States. And it was our governor, Earl Warren. Then what does he do? He becomes a Supreme Court Justice of the United States. And what cases is he listening to? He's listening to Brown versus the Board of Education. And he uses the same words, the same wording, almost it's just a little mixed up, to integrate all of the United States that he had used to integrate California, for it to become the first state to be integrated. So yes, Mendez is a very important case, and I want all students to know about it, that everything is possible here in the United States. And yes, briefer send-in, Mendez was not fought by just Mendez and the people that joined, but it was also fought with brief sent-in by the NACP. They came in and helped us, the Jewish Congress, the National Lawyers Guilds, the American Civil Liberty, and the Japanese American. So aside from Latinos, everybody will join you. I tell the students, when there is something you're fighting for, people will come in and join you. Today, it is so important that we learn about other cultures and understand their traditions, their faith and family lives. Because the more we know about the more we know about other cultures, the less we fear them. So much hate is driven by fear today. And it's critical that we teach diversity in all our schools here in the United States. Now we see so much hate and racism, discrimination, and racial segregation going on. We cannot stand by and do nothing. Every one of us can do something. Yes, we all realize we have to do so much work ahead of us. And we can't blame one person, and we can't blame one politician, one establishment, or one religion. We all are to blame for what is going on. So Mendez is so important, because after the case was won, it led our governor, yes, to integrate California, and he signed the laws that segregated Asians and Native Americans here in California, and repealed all the segregation laws in California in 1947, June 14, 1947. So it's been an important case, and I want everybody to know how anybody can stand up and work for whatever is just and for liberty. For minority students with so much hate crimes that are going on, and the low percentage of students going into college, it is so important that they learn and honor their culture, and that we teach their culture here in the United States of everybody that's here. We must have diversity taught in all the classes. And just like Dolores mentioned, we have started teaching it here in California. So we must have it in all the other states. And I need to tell you that I will continue to tell my story. My sole intent is to encourage students to stay in school and get an education. Because yes, that is what's going to give them the American dream, nothing else. And that's why I'm here today talking to you about the Mendez case that integrated California, the first state to be integrated into the United States. Thank you for having me here. And Mr. Alvarez, you keep on telling that story. And it took me 23 years. It's been 23 years, and I go to schools, even in California, and they had never heard about the Mendez case. So thank you.
Wow, no, like como dijo en el video, la lucha sigue. You're exactly right. We're going to go ahead and give our participants an opportunity, because I already see lots of you asking questions already in the chat boxes and comments and statements. So please enter them into Thought Exchange. All right, storytelling is powerful for families and students. History needs to link Latinos' contributions to education. What are your thoughts on that, Senora?
Oh, absolutely, because I think it's so important that people are aware of our history, and only by storytelling do they know about our history, about familias that have been standing up for their students. I think that one thing that I know for sure about my families is that my Latino family, that Latinos love their children, and they go through so much to come to the United States to have their students, their children go to school, and it's their love of their children that they go through all this. And it was the love of us, Gonzalo, Jeronimo, and myself, that my father stood up to fight the Mendez case, because he couldn't see the injustice that was going on with his children. Because my father, just like in the Lemongrove, my father was very, very smart and had gone to that Mexican school, and they had taken him out of the Mexican school. They had taken out 3 other Latinos out of that Mexican school and placed them in that white school. And he had gone to the white school till he was in the 5th grade. When he got in the 5th grade, my grandmother was the one that made him come out of leave the school and go work in the fields, because she had run out of the money my grandfather had given her to come when they came to California from Chihuahua, Mexico. So my father loved school, and he knew about education, and up to the 5th grade, and he learned about the commandments, the 14 amendments. And so it was him that knew that it was so important that his children received the right education. So I know it's important for all students to get a good education, but I know too that Latinos, even though sometimes they're not able to help, Latinos families are not able to help them with their homework or with money, but they want children to get educated. They want them to have the best life they can here in the United States, and they know that school is the way that they're going to be able to contribute to having a healthy, wonderful life here in the United States. Just as, like my father knew that it was education that was going to get us to this point that I am right now.
Thank you. The next question is, what do you think gave your family the courage to stand up when so many others couldn't?
I think it was really the courage that gave my father the courage to stand up, was that he had gone up to the 5th grade and he had learned about the 14, learn what was right and what was wrong, and about the Constitution of the United States, that we're all equal under God. And he had learned about that, and he trusted it. And that's why he stood up for it, to fight against discrimination here in the United States.
What an amazing story. You mentioned that racism still impacts students in school today. In your opinion, what can be done to address this?
Well, what is happening right now with the effect of segregation is that we are more segregated now than we were in 1947, 1943, when it all started, ended in 1947. It's because, of poverty, people stay in the same locations, and sometimes they're Latino barrios, and the two schools that are named after my mother and father, one is in Santana, in a Latino section of town. And so it's 100% Latino students there. So we're segregated in that school. And the one in Los Angeles is East LA, all Latinos. So it's 100% Latinos there. So yes, we're segregated right now. So what I'm saying is that, yes, sometimes it's because of politics, because of racism. Sometimes it's because, of poverty, that you can't move out of those certain areas. So many things affect, what's going on. And yes, we have racism, as Dolores mentioned before, that continues here. But there's no reason why we can't continue, living our lives and living the American dream, because we can't do it by just getting our education and becoming just like all our teachers that are here today listening to here, that have become educators and professionals. And they know that here in the United States, we have the best life that we can have. I know, because I have traveled all over the world. I've been to all 72 countries and all 7 continents. And I know that this is the best place to be in the United States of America. And yes, even though we might have racism, there's no reason why our students can excel in their studies and become governors, become secretaries, like the one that spoke first today, Secretary of State, was he a Secretary of State? So there's nothing that can prevent them from doing that.
Thank you very much. The next question is gonna be, taking the first step is always the hardest. What piece of encouragement can you provide for young people to stand up for equity in the educational system?
I think one of the things is to stay in school, because that's my thing, stay in school, get educated, be just as smart as as your peers, whoever you're talking to, be just as smart as them, and stand up and talk, and let them know, what is right. We all know what's right and what's wrong. There's no reason why anybody cannot stand up for what's right, because we all know what's right and what's wrong. So yes, I want you to stand up, when you're being attacked, and stand up for what's right in a professional, educated way. Answer the people, and you will win.
That's exactly right. How can teachers elevate your story and stories like it?
Well, one of the things is that to have it taught in schools, that history is just like we're trying to get diversity taught in all of the United States right now, to talk about the other people, of all our nationalities. We all have contributed, Asians have contributed, African Americans have contributed, Latinos have contributed. We need to get that out and taught in the schools. And Indians have contributed, we all have contributed, and teachers can elevate our stories by talking about them and letting, the students know about, other cultures. It's so important that they know about all other cultures and not to fear other cultures. What gives
Go ahead,
you,
Connor.
Connor?
Yeah. What gives you the strength to continue telling this amazing story and engaging with the new generation?
Well, my strength is, I always tell, when I start, I always say, I'm just a storyteller, I'm just telling the story of these amazing these amazing families that got together and fought, for justice. And what happens? They win. So that gives you just a wonderful story that tells you that if you stand up for judgment, for something that's right, people will join you and they will help you win, and you can win. And that's what keeps me telling the story about Mendez versus Westminster, how these farmers, they stood up and they went against the establishment, and they were able to fight and win, because we do have justice here in the United States.
And the last question.
Yes.
How would you recommend those of us who are not history teachers bring these conversations into our classrooms?
Oh my gosh, that's very interesting if you're not history teachers, because you can bring it in when there's so many situations. The students will come up and let you know what happened today, or how they were discriminated, or how they don't think they can do it, in class, or how they can go on, because of all the things that are going on. I always tell the students, don't give me any excuse of why you can't do this, because I remember when I was young, my father lost everything because, yes, he's the one that organized Mendez versus Westminster. It wasn't somebody else that organized Mendez versus Westminster. He did it. And he's the one that was able to get Mendez versus Westminster and fight it and won it. And so it's so important that we know that students, teachers, that you can bring this in, whatever the student has to say, or that he can't do the homework. There's no reason why he can't do the homework. You as a teacher, you can help him. You can help him find somebody else that will help that student. As a teacher, if they come and tell you about how they can't afford to go to college, my gosh, I remember when I was young, my father lost everything fighting this case. Everything. We lost everything, to the point that for me to go on to school, I had to go work 3 to 11 in a cannery, 3 to 11 at night, and get up in the morning and go to school. So we didn't have scholarships like they have now. So there's no reason that students can't go on to college, or they can work part-time and go on and get that money and go to college. They don't have the grade point average, well, they can study like I did. They can study. I used to study all night so I could pass, because I wanted to be a registered nurse, and I couldn't. If I got a C, I was going to be kicked out of nursing school. So I knew that I had to do it. So there's nothing. So teachers, you have to encourage them about, all these things. And I know you do that, because it was teachers that helped me, and I know you do it. And you can always bring the story Mendez versus Westminster if you want to, about how this was done and how it did succeed. Nothing was able to stop it.
That's exactly right. Nothing was able to stop it. Well, what an amazing and incredible story. You certainly have left many of us inspired. And so I really want to thank you, and just say thank you for being here with us and sharing your journey and continuing to talk about it, so that all of our teachers and our students are aware of it. Gracias, Señora Mendez. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Adios.
Adios. All right, so now we are going to transition into an amazing best-selling author and Latina leader, Dr. Juana Bordas. She's the president of Mestiza Leadership International. Her best-selling book is Salsa, Soul, and Spirit, Leadership for a Multicultural Age, won in 2008 at the International Latino Book Award for Leadership. And this specific book is utilized in over 150 universities. She also has the book, The Power of Latino Leadership. It received the Natellas Prize for Best Multicultural Book in 2014. It became the International Latino Book Award for Leadership. And she has received Lifetime Achievement Awards from the International Leadership Association in 2019, and she is the first Latina honored with this prestigious award. Help me welcome La Señora Juana Bordas.
So it was such an honor to hear the last presenter, and to see our young people engaged in the presentation as well. I have a PowerPoint for you that I'm going to share. But I wanted also to let you know that I'm an elder in our community now, but I was raised in Florida, and I have allegiances. In fact, I don't know if some of you are in West Palm Beach, but that's one of my ancestral homes after we immigrated here. So I'm happy to be connecting through technology. So we're going to start on the first slide because I wanted to tell you a little bit about my time in Florida. So if we can move that over. Is it moving? Yeah, there it is. Okay. So Sylvia was just saying that anybody could go to college. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my immigrant experience later. But I do want to tell you about the fact that I was the first person, not only in my family, but in my genetic line to become an educated person, right? My mother had a 5th grade education, and no one had thought about it. And I don't think she thought I was going to go to college either, because she thought a high school education was una buena educación. And when I worked in the barrios of Denver, particularly with some of our immigrant people, they felt that way as well. So part of what we have to do is to bring them into a modern time, and say, yeah, today, getting a college education is really important. So that's a picture of me at the University of Florida. I entered the University of Florida in 1960. So you can do the math if you want, but when I got there, I never met another Latino or Latina, and the school was segregated. There were no Black people at the University of Florida either. And so in my presentation, you're going to see how much hope and inspiration I have for the future. It doesn't mean it's not going to take a lot of hard work to get there. But I believe, because of my own lifetime, because it's been over 50 years since I went to college, that we can do this. And that if we look at the amount of change that has taken place in these 50 years, and I'm going to talk about the teacher and the educator as leader, because in leadership, which is my field now, because I believe that Latinos need leaders to move our community forward that are committed and competent and understand how to create change, that you should be thinking about the future, that you should be thinking about the kids that are here today. What is the environment they're going to lead in? And be really having that vision of the multicultural society where Latinos will take their rightful place as leaders. So I go to the University of Florida and I am scared to death. I have grown up in this little house in Tampa, Florida, where we immigrated. My mother, because she was such a brilliant strategist, this immigrant woman was so smart, had gotten me a scholarship to a Catholic school. And some of the girls were going to college. So I thought that was a great idea, but my parents were like, what? You want to go to college? And sometimes you have to help your kids with that because they're ahead of their parents in a sense. So here they go driving me in their little car to the University of Florida, which was only 120 miles away, but to them, I was going to a foreign country. I didn't have a chaperone. They thought this was, and so we were all scared. So I go to orientation and I sit down, and here comes this white guy with khaki pants and a plaid shirt and loafers, and he's going to give us our orientation. And he says, look to your right, look to your left. Only one of you would graduate. And it was true. The University of Florida, it's only they graded on a bell-shaped curve, and they knew how many people would graduate out of the freshman class. And so I was petrified. And this is the first time I can remember. And I believe in the power of our ancestry. I believe in the power of our history. I believe in the power of what we've been able to accomplish as a people. When you hear the story we just heard, we have the force and the determination to be able to lift our people up because of how far we've come for 500 years through the conquest, through discrimination, through being minorities, through being marginalized. 70% of us still are working class. So it was the first time I can remember sitting there and drawing on the power of my ancestors. I knew how hard it had been for my poor mother who scrubbed floors for me to get there. I knew how much my family had sacrificed to leave their country and to come here. I knew as the youngest child, the youngest daughter, that I could do something to advance, because when you advance yourself, you advance your family, you advance your community, you advance your people. And so this was not going to happen. And so I looked to my right And I looked to my left and I said, ay, pobrecitos, it's gonna be me. And that kind of determination is what you want to get your students to have. The idea, and I'll talk more about it because I thought when I was growing up, that I was poor and an immigrant, but we will talk about how we really come from greatness, that we come from people who not only have kept their values as we've moved forward, but that have continued to lift up our community as we go. And so this is a picture of me about 7 years ago when I was invited back to the University of Florida to give a speech to the all the Latinos that were entering as freshmen that year. And there were 1,800 of us. There were 1,800 of us. And I told them that story. I told them that I said to myself when this man said that, I will do this. I will do it for the people who came before me and sacrificed so much for me to be here. And I will do it for the Latinos who will come after me. And there's so much power in that when you realize that you're not just you're not alone. You have your ancestry, you have the future, you have your community, you have all the people that you stand for. And so there I was able to give all of these young Latinos the inspiration of how far we've come as a people. And that year, if you'll move the slide, and that year something else phenomenal happened. The first Latina was elected president of the student body. And she got, it was only by like 25 votes. And the pictures of the Latinos crying at the university because they finally had not only gotten to the university, but they had achieved something that showed the rest of the students and the rest of the university the power and the strength that we have as a people. And so as educators, the next slide, please. As educators, you have to look and see what is the future that we're preparing our children for. We know that the United States is going through an incredible demographic shift and that there will no longer be a dominant society in the lifetime of your students. You are preparing your students to live in the multicultural age. You are preparing your children to become leaders of that society. And that's your job as an educator, to prepare Latinos to live in the multicultural global age and to be proud and to be leaders of that. So the youth entering school today will be 30 years old when we become a multicultural society. And as we know, 30 is young. You're just beginning to have an impact in your career. A 10-year-old will be 20, beginning to, or in the middle of a college career or preparing themselves for the future. And that's the vision that you have to keep when you're working with these young people. What kind of a society are they going to be living in? And how can you prepare them? By sharing their history, by letting them tell their stories, by finding them the role models, by giving them hope and vision that they too will be able to move forward and to become leaders of this new age. Next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about Hispanic identity because it's so important for us to know who we are. And our identity has evolved. Now, the first thing is that when I went to college, there was no such thing as a Latino. We did not even become a group until 1977. And the first time the government actually recognized us is they gave us a week in 1968 to celebrate our heritage. And all of these months that we have, Black History Month, Women's History Month, the idea of having LGBT month, all of this stuff that we have to have that because we've been excluded from the history books. And I don't know if you read, but Texas this week, the legislature just voted to take out of the curriculum the struggles of the Mexican people in Texas and the history of our people there. And when you take away a people's history and identity, you take away their power. So our identity is important, and you have to understand that Latinos are in the identity formation stage. We are still not united, and I'm going to talk about not only why, but what we need to do. So we did not even get added to the census till 1980. We're only 42 years old. We're a young community. We're a young people. You have to realize that the NAACP and the Urban League are 100 years old, that the Red Cross was formed in the 1980s, right? That, I mean, people have histories in this country. We're the only group that is just emerging. In the year 2000, Latinos got added to the census, and today, 51% of us still identify with our countries of origin. So I'm a Latina, but I'm Mexican and I'm Nicaraguan. And so that connection is important because Latinos that will not only be the leaders of the multicultural age in the United States, but we will be connectors to the global age because we're connecting and are connected to 26 countries. Next slide. So what is a Latino, right? It's very important because your job as a teacher, which I consider you as a leader, as you know in Spanish, the word is maestro. You're the maestros that will help us form this unity from our immense diversity. In order to do that, we have to know our history. We have to know our identity, and we have to have respect for all the different people that make up our community. And this is especially important to young people. You know, the job of an adolescent is to answer the question, who am I? Who am I within the context of my family, within the context of my community, within the context of my society, within the context of this world, this whole idea of helping young people know their identity. And so the integration of Latino history and culture into your curriculums is very important because our children need to know who they are. Next slide. So one of the real important things is when I went to the University of Florida, one of my majors, because I didn't know what I was doing, was history, because I've always loved history. And one of the things many of us don't know is that, of course, we know that the conquest of the Spanish world, which includes New Mexico and a third of the United States and Florida, all the way up to Alaska, to Valdez, Alaska, the San Juan Islands, the conquistadors went everywhere. And one of the things we know that was different about the conquistadors and the Western settlers or the Western conquistadors is that the Spanish integrated with the indigenous people, which is part of our background. The reason they did this is because Spain was already mixed. The Spanish are the mestizos of Europe. You know, they're 90 miles from Spain. The Romans came, those are the aqueducts, and the Romans came, so that we have Roman blood, the Roman languages. The Visigoths came from the north. If you go northern Spain, people are Europeans. The Arabs and the Moors and the Jews, the people from Africa were there. It was Catholic and Muslim and what's the other religion? I can't see. Oh, Jewish. My slides are covered by people and Jewish. So the Spanish were the mestizos of Europe. And second of all, the king and queen, Ferdinand and Isabel, said you couldn't enslave people. So we were free people in the sense. It's not a good story. The conquistadors, I always have a part in my book called How Do You Love a Conquistador? Because apparently our people did, because we're a mixture between the Spanish and the Indians. So if you want to do the next slide. So this is our culture, right? We're fusion culture. We're a mixed culture, and that brings vitality. Nature loves a hybrid, right? We get vitality and resilience and strength, and we're prolific. We're energetic people. And so we have the Spanish with the Spanish flamenco and the guitar, the Spanish guitar. We have the arches from the Moors and the aqueducts from the Romans. We have the bongos and the drums that come from our African ancestry because we were also mixed with Africans here. We have the indigenous people of the hemisphere. We have the maracas, which are actually Indian rattles from our Indian ancestors. And we have a vision for this with Our Lady of Guadalupe, who came only 13 years after the conquest, when many of the Indians were dying. And she came as a mestiza with half Indian and half Spanish features. And many of the symbols on her, the aqua shawl, which was the sacred color of the Aztec Indians. And she came to give hope and esperanza to a conquered people. And she said, hold on, because a future is coming. And we know this is true because Our Lady of Guadalupe had a black sash, and that black sash to the Aztec said that she was pregnant. And she was pregnant. They thought she was the Earth Mother. She was pregnant with new life, the new mestizo Latino culture that would be born in this hemisphere. And so our traditions really are, and our children need to know that our traditions are that we are the foundation of the multicultural people that will come in this century. Next slide. So how do you know this is true? Well, I wish I were down in Florida so I could have some arroz con pollo and go to the Havana. We know it's true because a staple in all the Latino subgroups are rice and beans. Rice from our Spanish ancestry, beans from the Indians. They say to you, do you want a corn, maíz, or maíz or harina? And you go, I always say maíz because I want to connect to my Indian grandmother. That's Indian. Harina is Spanish. Then we have corn and squash and avocados and tomatoes and onions, and the Incas had 3,000 kinds of potatoes. One of the things that we gave to the world is that while they were building these cities in Europe, the people in this hemisphere were the great agriculturalists. And the people that came over from Spain and from Europe were malnourished. And the people here, there wasn't even any disease, but all of these things remind us of who we are. But the Spanish brought pigs, and so we love our chorizo, and we love our lechon. And so right on our dinner plate is the mixture of who we are. Next thing. And one of my favorites is moros con cristianos. I don't know if any of you all know that, but if you're Cuban or Puerto Rican or live in the Caribbean, there's a dish where they add the white and the rice and the beans together, especially red beans, and it comes out to be a different color, like the Moors. And so even in our food, when we say that food is moro con cristianos, we're celebrating the mixture of who Latinos are. Next slide. So Latinos are also global, and we have a global vision. We're connected across the world, in Spain and Gibraltar and Europe, 20 nation states in the Americas plus Puerto Rico. We have 2 small colonies in Africa where Spanish is the official language, and we have the Philippines and Los Estados Unidos. So because of our history, culture, and values, Latinos are the connectors to our international and global world. Go ahead. Additionally, in the United States, I'm an immigrant, and 40% of our growth in the last century was through immigration. So that's an important thing because, and it depends on the political climate because immigration has been halted, but it's projected that by 2040, 1 in 5 US residents will be immigrants. And so when you're talking with students today who are going to be leaders in the future, one of the group of people they will need to lead are immigrants. And who better to lead an immigrant population than a community that has immigrant roots? The other thing that's really great is that immigrants, when they come in from Cuba or Puerto Rico or Venezuela or Colombia or Bolivia or Chile, I could go on, they revitalize our cultural core. Because you see, Latinos, in order to be successful in America, the US, many times have to assimilate. In the Southwest, many Mexicans lost their language because they were so discriminated against to have accents and to not know English well. But the immigrants come over here and they know the language and the customs and the dance, and they're proud, and they're not minorities because they were, in their country, they were the major group. And so they don't have that sense that we have. And so they revitalize our core. And that's good because Latinos are not assimilating like other groups. We are going to take our values into the mainstream. We are going to Latinize America. And so we have to integrate our immigrant children, and we have to show them the power of their experience. They're not deprived. They don't know the language. They're bilingual. They have strength. They have resiliency, and they are multinational. And so they are bringing gifts and assets to our country. Go ahead. So how do we know this is true? You know, sometimes people go like, oh, Juana, that's really nice, but how do we know it's true? So we know it's true because when Latinos were asked to pick when Hispanic history should be, Hispanic History Month, Heritage Month should be, they picked September 15th to October 15th to connect to our roots, to Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, to Mexico, Chile, Belize. We also picked Columbus Day and changed it to Dia de la Raza. And Dia de la Raza celebrates all the people from all the races and all the countries that inhabited the New World. And so Latinos are not only international and connected to their roots, but they welcome people. They have a bienvenido spirit. They welcome people to participate in our culture. And that's why this slogan from Hispanic Heritage Month, Diversity United, Building America's Future Today. Latinos represent the great diversity of America, but we're an inclusive culture that welcomes other people to join us. Go ahead. So who are Latinos? Latinos are an ethnic group. We're not a race because all the races are present in the Latino community. So we're kind of like the Jewish community. And what unites us? Now, remember, we're working on our identity, so we have to bring this together. But we do have a shared history, a history of colonization, a history of being Spanish, a history of having indigenous blood, a history of being marginalized in this country. We have adopted the Spanish language and speak Spanish. We have a common spiritual tradition. Traditionally, many of us were Catholic, but the Catholic Church looks very different in South America than it does in other parts of the world. But what really unites a culture and unites Latinos is our values. So we're going to spend some time looking at that. So Latinos are a culture, not a race, and culture is learned. Latinos have a bienvenido spirit, and that's why we can welcome people into the culture and we can welcome people to participate in the Latino experience. Go ahead. So how diverse are we? Well, the census says there are over 30 Hispanic or Latino subgroups. And so it is complicated what our identity is. And if we look at the chart, which is the next slide, if we look at the chart from the Pew Hispanic Center, and there's one more thing that you have to pull up, you will see that Latinos identify as multicultural, as mixed race. They identify as indigenous, as having Indian background. They identify as Afro-Latino, like a quarter of us. I have African blood because I'm from the coast of Nicaragua. And the same thing in the Dominican Republic and the coast of Colombia and the whole Caribbean. And so we not only are part of all the different countries, but we also have a mixed race blood. And again, that makes us hybrids. That makes us multicultural. That makes us hybrids. That makes us strong. And that makes us the prototype for the evolution of humanity into the multicultural people. Go ahead. So that's a picture of my familia when one of my nieces got married. I think it was the most expensive place we'd ever been. But you can see I come from a multicultural tribe. And if you look at the next picture that you put up, so one of my theories, one of the things I write about it, and by the way, if you want to order my book today, you're going to get a link for 40% discount. It's so cheap, you won't believe it. So culture is learned. Back, slide back, thank you. So culture is learned. And the Latino culture, the Latino family is very elastic, right? We have tíos and tías and madrinas y madrinos y compadres y comadres y primos, muchos primos, right? We would have a family reunion. I'd say to my mother, ¿Quién es eso? And she says, es tu primo. No questions asked. They're primos, right? And the muchos amigos. So one of the things that happens when my sister Rosemary married a German, he became a Latino by corazón. He learned to dance salsa. He liked his licuados. He loved her cooking. He grew papayas and mangoes. He became a Latino by corazón. and a Latino by affinity and by corazón. And I challenge all of you, go back to your schools. We have the greatest culture, the greatest contribution to make. Invite people to participate. Invite people to become part of the family. You know, adding another culture like we have had to do in America, we had to understand and learn the dominant culture system. It only makes you stronger. It only expands your consciousness. It only makes you smarter. So let's invite people to join the Latino group and be part of this incredible transformation that we're leading. Next slide. So I want to tell you about myself. And this is extremely important that you do this with your students, because when they see me, primero soy un vieja, ellos no saben ni tienen ni idea that I was this cute, beautiful young thing in the past, right? So they see you and they have no way to identify, how do I get from here to there? And so I begin all of my leadership programs with people bringing the oldest picture of their family and telling their story. And sometimes you can't do that all together, but every student could have a day or a month, or you could do it in different ways. We need to know who we are, and we need to know our stories, especially for young people to be able to identify with you. You know, they see somebody with a PhD or a teacher, and you know, in our culture, we respect our teachers, so we don't really have that kind of connection. My mother, Maria, is in the middle there with 6 of her 8 children, as we were about to board a banana boat on the coast of Nicaragua to come to the promised land, the land of opportunity. And that's me, the little girl in the corner with my hand like this. I know that I'm thinking, what is happening here? Because we got on this banana boat, we were on the hull of this boat. That was my first memory. There were bananas, and then there was this room that had these bunk beds that my family was in. And so we come to the United States, and my mother, who I said had a 5th grade education, had such a vision and such determination. She went to the parish priest and she said, "Puedo cocinar, limpiar, cuidar niños." I can cook, I can clean, I can take care of children. The humility that she had, but the strength and courage. And so how could he refuse a selfless soul? Because she said to him, I came here so my children could have a better life. I came here so my children could be educated. And so cooking and cleaning floors in the school lunchroom, my mother made sure that I could go to a good school and get a bueno educación. But when I was growing up, I had an inferiority complex. You have to realize this is the 50s. And we had moved to the other side of town because my sister, my oldest sister, had served in the waves in World War II and gotten a GI Bill. And most Latinos moved into the middle class because of the GI Bill, because you could buy a home and you could go to college, or you could go to a technical school, you could get an education. And so we had moved there, and I grew up in this. I had to assimilate at 7 years old to walk into a classroom. I had been in West Tampa in the barrio, and I did not think that I was smart. Your kids don't think they're smart when they have to grapple with so many things. And I didn't have clothes like the other kids. And my mother would bring the food home to feed us from the lunchroom. And so I grew up with this idea that, that I wanted to be white at that point until I really learned a different story after that, but I had to survive and I had to be successful. When your parents sacrifice everything, their home, their country, their language, the respect they had in their community, to come here and be treated as if they're stupid, as if they don't know anything, as sometimes as if they don't have anything to contribute. When you grow up like that, you do not understand. And yet today, when I look at who I am and what I inherited from my mother and from my immigrant roots, I know that I came from greatness. That your immigrant kids that are there, that those kids who may not have the money, The kids who sometimes have to, go on the special lunches or borrow books, or I had to borrow clothes, that those kids come from greatness. And if you can help them transform their experience and understand the gifts that they're receiving through this experience, because if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I would put up a Latino immigrant against anybody that needed to get a job, for example, because of how hard we work and how determined we are. And so we have to integrate our history for our children. We have to let them take pride in their heritage, and we have to help them to understand that their experiences are preparing them to be leaders of the future. Go ahead. So these are the kind of questions I ask students. I ask my students, who are of course older, but it's the same thing because nobody has taught us our history, is where did your family come from? What are the values and strengths you inherited from your family? What is your family's history? And then when you bring Latinos together, how does this reflect Latino diversity, the immigrant, the Mexican who's been here forever, right? How does it reflect the strengths and the things that we have overcome as a people? And again, this is the foundation for Latinos to understand who they are. So this is me integrating my history. That's me in the middle there at Machu Picchu, because my great-great-grandmother came from Peru. And the Peruvians, of course, were one of the great empires. And there's a picture of the mountains, because when I finished college, I wanted to give back to my people, and I wanted to reintegrate my culture and relearn my language that had been stripped from me. And so I joined the Peace Corps and spent 2 years in Chile working with women to do sewing and knitting. They were little micro-enterprise groups. And I spent time in Puerto Rico in the Yunque, being trained for leadership. A great experience that I know made me Puerto Riqueña. And I've been to Mexico at least 30 times, connecting to my Mexican roots. And by the way, staying in places that were $15 a day when I was first starting off. You don't have to be rich. I took buses, climbing the pyramids to see the greatness of the cultures that came before us. I went back to Nicaragua, and those are my Black Nicaraguans relatives from that's me when I'm 28 or 9 with the scarf on, with my Tío Manuel and mi Tía Piña. Showing my Black ancestry of Nicaragua. And then, and I wouldn't suggest you all do this in your 70s, the last trip I took, you can see it on the left with those beautiful circles and the beautiful palm trees, is I walked 3 days in Colombia to La Ciudad Perdida, the lost city of the people, and their Indian tribes are actually connected to the tribes in Nicaragua. And so in my 70 plus years, I made it a point that I was going to integrate the power and beauty of my culture, all the different people that make up who we are, the rainbow of the Latino family. Next. Next. So when I do this kind of work with people and I ask them to identify who they are, you'll see from this slide that it changes, right? When you first come here, you say, oh, I'm a Chileno, or I'm Colombiana, or I'm Mexicana. But then as you stay here, your identity begins to flourish and grow. And you begin to find out that you're more of who you are, right? And so then you can say, I'm Spanish and Indian and Apache, and I'm from New Mexico, from Nueva Mexico. I am a ciudadana del mundo. I am Mexican American, but I'm also Tejana. Because you see, your identity, just like your consciousness, just like your intelligence, can expand. And so I encourage people to really take time to interview their abuelas, to read about their country, to travel if they can, to watch the movies about different people. Let us begin to really celebrate who we are as Latinos and the incredible rainbow family that we come from. Next slide. So who am I? I am Nicaraguan by birth. I'm indigenous, French and Spanish. My father was French and Nicaraguan. My great-grandmother was from Peru. I am Mexican by culture. I served in the Peace Corps, so I have a Chilean heart. I'm a proud American. I respect this country. I thank them for their contributions of what they've given me. So I consider myself pan-Hispanic or multi-Hispanic. I believe that complexity is at the heart of who we are, and that's what we have to embrace. The fastest growing identity among young people is that they're multicultural. My grandsons identify today as multicultural. They're all of it, and we can do that. Next. So let's talk a little bit about our history. Keep going. Remember that we have so many people in the United States that only Brazil and Mexico have more people of Hispanic descent. Hispanics in the United States are 60 million people, and we are an economic, cultural, and international force. Now, you're in Florida, and that was the first European settlement. The Spanish were the first people here, way before the Pilgrims, almost 7,500 years. And Spanish was the first European language spoken in this hemisphere. And you'll see that a third of the United States was Mexico, and that was lost in the Mexican-American War. By the time the white settlers got to the Southwest, there were churches, there were schools, there were fincas, there were ranches, there were mines. The Spanish settled this country. And so we have a very old history here, including where you are in Florida. And so we can be proud. We're not the new kids on the block. We were here before white settlers came. Keep going. Keep going. So when I teach, I usually have, and by the way, if you go on my website, juanabordas.com, I do sell these products just because I'm here to do that, but I don't make much money doing it, but it's okay. I did a Latino community timeline, and I used to just take a piece of paper, which you can do, a long piece of paper, and I would break it up, and I would teach the students what happened in different decades to help us understand Hispanic history. And so this is the timeline of the last century, where we look at the 1950s all the way to 2000, so that we can understand the roots of our people. Next slide. So what happened in the 1950s? I already shared that World War II was how we got into the middle class, but I want you to know that Latinos have more Medal of Honor recipients than any group in America. We are proud. All four of my brothers and my sister served in the military. LULAC was our first organization, and it was a sindicato. It was there to help the workers. That's a tradition in the Latino community. Our organizations help our people. And so that was the only organization until after the World War II, when Latino veterans couldn't be buried in Arlington Cemetery next to white veterans, even though they had died for their country. And so we started the GI Forum in order to recognize and to get our veterans honored for their contributions. In the 1950s, we lived in a segregated society, and there were signs, no Mexicans, no dogs, in Texas restaurants and across the Southwest. But we had our first political movement, and it was called A Class Alone, A Class Apart. And what happened was, and most of our hotbed stuff, LULAC, the GI Forum, this took place in Texas, because Texas is on the frontera, on the border. And even today, the discrimination of Latinos there is higher than most places. And so kids in San Antonio were being sent to schools across the tracks. And when they tried to go to the courts and change that, they said, oh no, you're not Black. We're not discriminating against you. And so we did something that we still have a tradition of doing today. We saved our money. The abuelas gave a peso. We sold burritos. We had bailes. You know how we do it. We raised enough money to send Hernandez to the Supreme Court. First time Latinos are recognized as a group, and he won the case. It said, you're not being discriminated against because of race, you're being discriminated against as a class. And so that was a very important thing for Latinos. There was also, for those of you that want to laugh, is I Love Lucy, where we had the first person of Hispanic descent, Ricardo, on TV. We had the great Puerto Rican Valenzuela, who was the first Latino who was in Baseball Hall of Fame, and he was a great humanitarian who died on a humanitarian mission to Nicaragua. And then, of course, we had the Cuban Revolution. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, here it is. Nope. 1960. So 1960s, as you know, was civil rights. That's when I entered college. I was a junior in college, sitting at my college dormitory, and I see this line of people with my history professor, Dr. Cantor. And I ran up and I said to him, Dr. Cantor, what are you doing? And he said, we're marching to integrate the University of Florida. And I got in line. That's how you become a change agent. That's how you do what Sylvia did. That's how you create change in your school. You stand and you get in line. And so the next year, 2 African Americans came to the University of Florida. But it was a time of civil rights, right? And a time when the Latinos weren't active yet. They had just become active. You just heard Dolores Huerta, Si Se Puede. You had Cesar Chavez. You had the United Farm Workers. You had the beginning of the National Council of la Raza and Aspira for Puerto Rican youth. And so we are just beginning to move forward in bringing equity and inclusion to the Hispanic community. And we have a great debt to pay, I think, to the African Americans, to Martin Luther King, to those who formed that movement, and to those who kept the idea of civil rights and equality moving forward. So it was a very incredible time. There was also the Vietnam War, and I will talk a little bit about that because there was something that happened that I want to talk about. And then women were also on the rise because, as you know, when I went to the University of Florida, it was 2 men for every woman. Today, women are the majority in college. And again, because I've been able to see through my lifetime the changes that have taken place, that gives me hope for the future. In 1970s, we really consolidated some of our organizations. We had enough Latinos in Congress to start the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. We had the movement for voting, which is very strong today, getting Latinos to vote. So we had the Southwest Voter Registration Project, Su Voto Su Voz, that started. Women got Roe versus Wade. We talked about Brown and education, the integration of schools, which also happened in Denver where I was there. And we also had amnesty. And so a lot of Latinos or Mexicans were able to come to this country and work, and some of them to receive citizenship. Next slide. I'm going over this kind of quickly for you. It's a long module that I do where we go through all of this, and people have to reflect and think about, where does my family fit in there? Do they fit in as immigrants who came over because of Castro's revolution? Do they fit in when Puerto Rico became a commonwealth and I was able to go back and forth? Did they fit in because my mother went to college and became part of the Latino movement? How does your family, how does this history come alive for you and for your students? And sometimes, because this is old history, they don't know, but they need to know the roots and foundations of the people. So 1990s, we're really looking at Latinas coming into their own. We had not only the first Latina congresswoman elected in the 80s, which was a Cuban woman, Ileana Ross-Linton from Miami. But now we have the next 2 women, and they also express Latino diversity. We have from California, a Mexican, Lucille Roybal Allard, and we have a Puerto Rican, Lydia Velasquez, coming from New York. And so even when we elect 3 congresswomen, it reflects our diversity. And so we're beginning to make our mark. We see that Antonia Novella becomes the first Latina to become a Surgeon General. But there's still so much conflict going on. And here's where I want to pick up the Vietnam War, because I was an activist in those days, and the war, of course, was an unjust war. And one of the things we wanted to do was end the draft, which we did. But unfortunately, at the time, the draft drafted everybody, including college students. And so it made a lot of people stand up and say no. Now today, the draft is a volunteer army, mainly poor people, mainly minorities, and the main reason they join is to go to college. I don't have anything against the military. I do not like it that our children have to sign up for the military in order to get an education. So one of my biggest platforms today is the cost of a college education, because I did work my way through college, and I was able to do that in the 1960s. And I believe our children have a right to be able to do that, not just people that are privileged and have the money to be able to send their children. So now we'll finish up with the year 2000, and we have the globalization. There's a globe there. We're beginning to see the globe being connected together. We have our first Latina as a Supreme Court Justice, Sotomayor. We have Latinos beginning to make their impact in Hollywood and in culture, which you can see today. I don't think I have my slides on that, but we're beginning to impact the cultural, the music, the food, the movies, Despacito became the most downloaded video. And so we also had a woman run for president, Hillary Clinton, and then again, and we elected the first Black president. And at that time, we had 31 Latinos in Congress. So it's important for us to know this history so that we know that it anchors us. We have roots. We've been here. We've been progressing, and slowly but surely, that Si Se Puede power is moving us forward. Next slide. So these are just, and I won't go over this too much, but you can see here the different organizations that were formed by the Latino community with the 60s, just two. But you have MECHA in 1969. That was the first Latino organization on university campuses because we finally had enough Latinos in college. The Su Voto es Su Voz. In 1974, we had SHIP, the Society of Hispanic Engineers. We finally had enough engineers to have an association of engineers, and today it's huge. I went to their conference a few years ago. There were 5,000 Latino kids there that were on their way to become engineers. We had the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, ASED, which is an interesting thing, by the way. All of these groups are coalitions because Latino leadership is about bringing people together and forming coalitions. So ASED is the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility, and they knew if each organization went to corporate America to ask them to be good corporate citizens, they wouldn't listen to them. So they're a coalition of 18 organizations that work together. And then we have on the other side, we have Latina organizations are beginning. Mujeres in Chicago is our oldest Latino organization. I'm very proud to say that I was the executive director and founder of Mi Casa in Denver, which was the second oldest Latino organization in the country, and the National Hispano Leadership Institute, because we had enough Latinas ready to learn leadership. So our community has been evolving, and as it has evolved, our organizations have grown and become more stronger. And for a community that's on the rise, the way we move forward is through our organizations. All right, so we said that Latinos are a culture. And since they're a culture, our values unite us. So let's go through these kind of quickly. Again, these are things, can we have the next slide, please? These are things that that you can teach your children. And so the first one is that Latinos are a we culture. We're not an I culture. The family, the community, people come first. And we work together to get where we are. The dominant culture is an I culture. It's an individualistic culture. It believes you get there by your own bootstraps and by your own energy. No, we believe it's together. It's not si yo puedo, it's si se puede. Yes, we can. Some of our values that support a people culture is generosity, mi casa su casa. Latinos are also a humanistic society. Money's not what's important to us, people. So we share. We have that sense of generosity and reciprocity. In order to be a people culture, you have to have respect for each other. And you have to be honest. Hombre, mujer de palabra, right? You have to keep your word. And we didn't used to have lawyers. We would shake hands because if you said you were going to do something, you had to do it. And by the way, that makes you a person with integrity, which is the number one thing people want in their leaders. And so Latinos are a cooperative culture and we serve each other. In fact, when a Mexican American meets you, it's como puede servirle. And that's a picture of me at Mi Casa when I was in my 30s. Again, it's important that people know that you were alive then and that you didn't always look like this, especially kids. Next. Next. So here are some dichos that I use to teach Hispanic culture. Hágalo con orgullo, con gusto, con ganas, right? So Latinos are taught to do things with pride, with energy, and with passion. And that gives us, on the other side, how does it make us leaders? We have a sense of excellence, we have a positive attitude, and we have passion. El camarón que se duerme se lleva el corriente. The shrimp that sleep gets carried away by the current. Very popular saying in Mexico, particularly in the Caribbean. And that teaches us to be proactive, to understand the climate, the environment in which you work. The camarón is looking around. They're not going to jump in until they know it's the right time. They're strategic. They're checking the current, which is the culture of your organization. They're figuring out who their supporters are, where they should go. And it teaches you to stay woke, to be aware. You know, that's so important to really know what's going on around you. Los que no trabajan no comen. If you don't work, you don't eat. So everyone contributes. Everything is shared. And more than that, work is dignified. Latinos love to work. We believe that we work. When we work, we contribute. When we work, you know, we're supporting our families. Next. Échale agua al caldo. Put more water in the soup. Latinos are resourceful. They can do more with less, and they know that sharing is caring. Because Latinos will say, donde come uno, come dos. And they will say, pruébalo, pruébalo, pruébalo. Nobody in the Hispanic community wants to eat alone. We want to share our food, and that's what makes us happy. And we were all told, no hay mal de que bien no venga. That something good will come from everything. And so Latinos are optimistic. We know how to transform negative things into positive things. We know how to learn from mistakes. And we know that, you know, la vida es buena, pero la vida es difícil. And so there's the good and bad in everything. And then we have survived and thrived as a species because we believe in paso a paso, poco a poco, step by step, we'll get there. And I say that as an intergenerational person, as someone who belongs to the elders. It's going to take time, step by step, but if we do it together, if we continue, if we go the long haul, we will achieve our dreams. Next. So finally, the Latinos are de colores. There's a saying in the Latino community, which I think is the golden rule of diversity. En cada cabeza hay un mundo. It's not just how you want to be called. It's who are you? What are your dreams? What do you want to be when you grow up? What's the subject you're best at? What do you need help at? What has your family taught you that has really made you who you are? What are the assets that you're bringing? You know, what are the gifts? What is your favorite thing about yourself? You know, you need to know your kids. You need to know your people if you're a leader. It's not just about knowing their ethnicity. Cada cabeza hay un mundo. And again, look at this Hispanic Heritage Month theme. Hispanic Americans energizing America's diversity. And so because of our history and culture, Latinos value the bienvenido spirit. Next. One gift that I think we're giving our ancestors that I've learned from my Mexican people is Dia de los Muertos, and it's so important. You know, when people came to the United States, white people who came to Ellis Island were told, cut your roots, forget your names, forget your ancestors, never go back home. We don't believe in that. We believe that our ancestors walk with us. We believe, like the movie Coco says, that you remember them and you call them forward. We believe that their gifts live in us. And we believe that you commemorate and you celebrate them. I believe this is one of the gifts Latinos will give to America. We will reconnect them to their ancestors. We will tell them how important it is for us to have that kind of connection with the past. Because if you don't understand your past, you cannot build your future. Next slide. So that's a good one. This connect, well, never mind. And so, yeah, this connection provides continuity, purpose, sense of identity, strength, knowledge, and resolve. Because if I can look at my Indian grandmother, I know what I can achieve because of who she was and how far my family has come. Next. So how do we know this is important? So if we got any Puerto Ricans in the crowd, they always say, ¿Y tu abuela dónde está? Right? Because of the Black mixture that's also part of our community. That's my grandmother, the one with the braids in the middle. But never forget your grandmother, your abuela. Never forget where you came from or the power and the beauty of our magnificent culture. That's one of the things that makes us who we are. And so it is so important for all of us to stop for a minute, just right now, to remember the name of our grandmother and to honor her. So I honor my grandmother, Margarita Bordas. You can put them in the chat or whatever. So I want to play a song for you in just a minute. The next slide, please. So this is, again, for you to take back. Values are the foundations for understanding the Latinx culture, our strengths, our contributions, our assets. Values can be infused in the school system. I've written on that, on how you take our values and bring them into the classroom, bring them in to empower your students. For example, generosity and sharing, respeto, respect for the individual, the bienvenido spirit, inclusiveness, welcoming people. And so it's not just about learning about our assets, it's about the Latinization of our country, about bringing these valuable things into the mainstream. We've learned the mainstream. Now it's time for the mainstream to learn about us. Next slide. So Latinos today are acculturating. We are not assimilating. We are moving forward and bringing our culture with us. The exciting thing about it is that in this time in history, the skill that you need is acculturation, not assimilation. You need to swim between cultures. You need to learn from African Americans. You've already learned a lot from white systems. Patricia got her PhD. I have my PhD. I understand the white system, but we need to acculturate and create a nation where people learn and cultures learn from each other. That's how we will really realize the dream of America. Next slide. So I always like Latinos to think a little bit about where they are on assimilation and acculturation. We don't have time to get into it too much, but I told you as a child, I assimilated. And then I knew I had lost a piece of my soul when my grandmother came at 13 and I couldn't talk to her. And so I began this journey to go back to find out who I was. And a key thing in that was going in the Peace Corps. I consider myself today a crossover. I can go into the Anglo culture. I taught at the Center for Creative Leadership. I teach corporate executives. I can do that because I understand their culture. I am bilingual and bicultural. And so you have to look and see, where are you? Because learning how to become Latino and proud, strengthening your own identity, learning about where you came from is the way you can help your children and the teachers that you work with become more of who they are. Next slide. So I just wanted you to see this quote and also the statistics on the bottom. 31% of Hispanics say they want to be more Latino. Why? Because our culture, our history, everything was taken from us and we want to reintegrate. 60% say they want to be bicultural. They want to be able to function in both worlds. My mentor, Raul Seguere, one of the great Latino leaders of the last century, sent you this message. He said, Hispanic success for both practical and pragmatic reasons, as well as for aesthetic, self-fulfilling, self-actualizing reasons, and for the quality and meaning of your life needs to be, I treasure who I am. I treasure my people, my culture, my language. I don't have to give any of that up to succeed. Indeed, if I keep all those things, it will make me more successful in practical as well as self-fulfilling terms. Latinos have a unique contribution to make to America. We can't do that if we give up our cultural core, our spirit that makes us who we are. Next slide. So these are my books that you today can get links to. I asked my publisher to give you a 40% discount. You'll never get a better deal. The Power of Latino Leadership, Salsa, Soul, and Spirit. And then if you contact me, I have a set of 21 dicho cards that you can use to teach children and to do dichos with them. So Patricia said she would send those links out for you. Keep going. All right, and we're going to skip these 3 slides and just go to the end because it's time. These are just the reasons Latinos will lead the 21st century. It's kind of like a summary of what I've already told you. You already know it. Next, I want to go to the last slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So one of the other things that I write about is that Latinos are bringing celebration to America. We're a festive culture. We invented the word fiesta. And Latinos celebrate life. We work hard, but we play hard. And we know that because of the song Celito Lindo that my parents taught me as a child, you know, canta no llores. And many times I wonder, how could our immigrants and our people who have struggled so hard be telling us to sing, don't cry? And we know it because of Celia Cruz, the queen of salsa, who told us, la vida es un carnaval. No hay que llorar porque la vida es un carnaval. And we know it because Mark Anthony tells us to vivir la vida. No, to enjoy life. No, you know, again. And we know it because Pitbull tells us, no pare la fiesta. How can we bring more celebration to our work, our school system? Because it is that in that celebrating of life that we get the energy, the inspiration, and the commitment to keep moving forward. We're going to end with, I've done a lot of writing on this and I've promoted it for 40 years, so I hope you all will help me. I believe that Latinos, in order to create unity, need vision and purpose and unity, but they also need a national anthem. I was sitting in Florida, in Orlando, Florida, doing a speech for the National Urban League about 30 years ago. And they said, could everyone please rise and sing the African-American Black national anthem? Lift every voice and sing. And so for 100 years, Black people who have gone before us in civil rights have celebrated who they are through their national anthem and their vision that they were here to save the soul of America, to bring back the founding values of America. And so I want you to ask to join me in singing the Latino national anthem. If you will move to the next page. It's de colores, because that's who we are. Latinos are de colores. We are the culture of many colors. We are the rainbow people. We are the ones that integrate all the races that come from 26 countries that are here to show humanity how by inclusion and respecting each other and really uplifting life and celebrating life, working hard, doing it together, that we can move forward. So I'm going to put this song on, and they don't pay me for singing, and you'll see why in a minute. De colores se listan los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajaritos que vienen de fuera. De colores desde el arcoíris queremos lucir, y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí, y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Yes, Latinos are here to tell you that you can love everybody, that we have great hearts, and that our hearts are de colores. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. And I hope we all get to meet someday in person.
All right, let's see what our questions, thoughts, and comments are from our participants. What top 3 pieces of advice do you have for Latinas entering leadership positions in their fields?
Well, I think some of the things that I was teaching today, I think are real essential. One of the first questions for leaders is, who are you and why do you want to be a leader? And leadership for what? I mean, in other words, what is your end purpose? And I really believe that real leaders have that sense of self. They know why and who they are. They've done their work as far as their internal integration, and also have done things like found out what their style is and how they're most effective. So I think that exploration of self is really important, first of all. And then second of all, having a purpose or a mission of why you want to lead. We can see in our country today that people who don't have that, including some of the political people in Florida, I feel, if they don't have that, then they're not really leading for the good of the people. And of course, Latino leadership, particularly because it's come out of the community, our leaders have led in order to benefit people. And so that's the thing that I really talk with leaders about. What do you want to do? Who are you? What are your gifts? What are your strengths? What are your challenges? And really get them prepared. So in my Latino leadership book, I have a whole thing on how do you prepare for leadership. Part of it is conciencia, knowing who you are. And part of it is just really figuring out what is it you need to learn and what field. I believe, by the way, in Latino destino, I believe in destino, that each person has a special contribution to make, and that's part of our culture. And so really self-exploration is what I encourage leaders to do before they move into the leadership field, and to ground themselves. So when the winds blow and there's challenges or whatever, they can stand firm because they know their values, they know why they're here, and they know what they want to accomplish.
Great, thank you. Connor.
Okay, the next question is, what are the biggest changes you've observed in your time as an educator, leader, and activist? What does this teach us about how change happens?
Great question. I want to thank people, by the way. I'm 2 hours ahead of you. I mean, it's 2 hours earlier for me, and I appreciate all of you staying this late. So thank you. Well, first of all, one of the biggest changes is women in leadership. I never dreamed as a little girl, like I had a Hispanic, I had a congresswoman that was a woman, that I didn't even think that would ever happen. And so the first thing is, I think that that women getting into positions of influence and change. I think what happens a lot of times is that you have to know why, not just why you're being called to leadership, but what is it women are contributing to leadership. So women have brought more collaborative forms, working with people, relationships. The idea of the process is important. So as women have moved into leadership, they've changed that. The next one, of course, is diversity. That we do have. They're not a lot, but we're moving forward, and we're getting more and more leaders that look like us. And we're getting more and more leaders that are diverse, including intergenerational leadership. We have 4 generations working in the workplace today. And so the second big change I've seen is, of course, the change in diversity. And I think the third one, which I really am excited about, is the change in the millennial generation and the new generation that's coming. They're the largest generation in the world, and you get to work with them. You get to work with the Ys and the Zs. And these are young people that are global, they're technological, they have values about political involvement. They're really a generation that's going to bring forward, I think, the revitalization of the American dream. And so you're sitting there right at the time that these changes are coming forth, but more people of color, more young people who are going to belong to an incredible generation. And then, of course, the advent of women in leadership. So I think in my presentation, change happens paso a paso, poco a poco. But you have to have that vision. You have to have that goal. You have to know where you're going. And then step by step, we get there. It also happens by creating a community of leaders. In my book, I talk about leadership by the many. The Latino model of leadership is critical mass leadership. We achieve through numbers, through people, through working together. And so I think that's a really important thing in leadership, is learning that change happens slowly, but change happens by people working together.
All right. Well, you certainly have inspired so many, especially with regard to embracing the family heritage. There are many that have mentioned that it's been very informative. How exactly would you describe your job title? How long have you been on this journey of discovery? They really enjoyed it. We need to share who we are as a people. Enthusiasm for who we are spreads acceptance and inclusion.
Okay, that's a really good one. You asked me how old I am. I'm going to be 79 in August. And I claim that my vitality and my energy, everything, of course, we come from incredible genetic stock. Let's put that out there, first of all, as hybrids. Nature loves a hybrid. And if Latinos would only keep to our diets and do what our ancestors have told us to do, we would be very strong and healthy. And but I also believe that if you have a purpose in life, that energizes you. And my purpose right now is to help bring about Latino unity, to help create as many leaders as I can. I've done a lot of work across this country in leadership programs. I'm currently president of Lideramos, the National Alliance of Latino Leadership. I was born to do this, and that's why I believe in Destino. I believe if you can figure out why were you born, just the fact that I'm the youngest daughter and all my sisters and my brothers and my mother's fathers, I get emotional about it. They educated me. They helped me. They gave me what I would need to be who I am today. And so I've been at this for over almost 60 years.
Excellent presentation. You stated Latinos a youth culture. Can you elaborate on this?
Well, 800,000 Latinos turn 18 every year. That's our voting block. But we're also the youngest demographic in America. And so you'll see that many of our school systems, especially in urban areas, are now a majority Latino. And so our youth, the thing about our culture is we're intergenerational. So they value me as an elder that has wisdom and experience and perspective, but I get my energy from young people. My favorite generation to teach is the millennials because they're old enough now to start making a difference. And I get energy and inspiration from them. And so we are a youth-oriented culture because we have so many young people, and you that are educators are right on the threshold of helping young Latinos find their place, not only in their own lives, but their own place in their culture and what they're going to contribute as in the future. But I also think, again, because we are genetic hybrids and we have so many different cultures and races and nationalities within us, that creates energy. What creates energy is not everybody being the same. What creates energy is synthesis, is fusion. It's bringing different things together. It's finding the best in each and then bringing that forward. And so I think that's one of the reasons we're a young culture, is because we have that energy and we have gozar la vida. We celebrate life. And that, again, brings us joy.
There's a comment in the chat box that talks about how they went to UF in the late 80s and there's still only about 6%. So you're definitely a trailblazer. By the way, I also went to UF, go Gators. So I know exactly what you were speaking about today. The last question that we'll end with is, how can we both acculturate and maintain our unique identities and characteristics?
Okay, so the thing about acculturation assimilation is it's a continuum. And I always, when I talk to Anglos, I say it's never too late to acculturate, because so many Anglos don't even know there's other cultures. They just assimilate and they think the dominant culture is the culture. And of course it is everywhere, and it's structured your schools, your educational systems, our books, everything. Even the fact that we read instead of do oral tradition, that's dominant culture. And so you can acculturate and go back and forth. When I assimilated as a young child, and as I look back on it, there were a couple of reasons for it. First of all, I would not have been successful if I didn't, and my family had sacrificed too much. So I was going to be successful, and I wanted to be liked, and I wanted to be, I wanted to accomplish. And, but I realized, after I met my grandmother and after I began to understand who Latinos were and work through some of that I had lost my soul. And like one of the other things, Raul Segure, that last quote I quoted you on how important it is to keep our culture, and that's going to make us even stronger and better and more fulfilled. And we're just going to be double, we're just going to be better because we really do understand the dominant culture system. Now, you might have to, sometimes I teach, what are the rules of power? How can you be strategic? Latinos a lot of time aren't contingent contingency thinkers. We don't have plan B because the way we grew up, we had to do with what we had and we had to be resourceful and we had to make it happen. So a lot of the things that the dominant culture may know at a very high level, we may not know, but we can learn it. We can learn to be more assertive because a lot of times we're so gracious. We're the nicest people on the planet. We don't always speak up, and there's some things we need to learn to polish our stone and to become more effective. But in reality, Latinos are you get 2 for 1 when you have a Latino who studied in the Anglo system and yet kept their culture. So you can always go back. That's why when you look at my life, I did that journey. You know, I was not going to allow this dominant culture to take my soul.
Well, Senora Bordas, thank you so much for bringing awareness and your incredible knowledge regarding the Latino history and culture and customs and traditions, ethnicity, beliefs, and the diversity. I know everybody here is just, delighted that you have taken us through this journey of the incredible history with regard to our Latino community. Gracias, Senora, for being here with us and sharing all of that.
Right. And if you want to honor me, please buy my books. And for those of you who wanted to know about the timeline, because somebody sent me, look on my website, juanabordas.com. And I'm trying to prepare materials so that you can teach this forward.
That's wonderful.
Besos y abrazos.
Sí, besos y abrazos. Muchas gracias, Senora, for being here. Thank you, all of you, for being here with us. I really, really appreciate it. We are really hoping that we are able to really ensure that we are infusing Latino history and culture in all of our disciplines, regardless of whatever that may be, because we know ultimately it will benefit all of our students, not just our Hispanic Latino students, but also the students that are not Hispanic Latino as well. Thank you, Connor. Gracias.
Bye. Have a good day.